Hello and welcome everybody to the 6 Pixels Under podcast. I am nerdSlayer, your host. This is episode, it's supposed to be 46. I don't know why it says 36, so let me fix that really quickly. By the way, if you guys forgot, we're doing this podcast live. So on this week's podcast, we have a bunch of WoW Classic news to get to, so we'll probably get that out of the way near the end of the current gaming topic section, which is the first section we do on the podcast, which we follow with the MMO Roundtable, which is a MMO segment that talks about all things in the realm of MMO news. But today, I won't do that segment because I'll probably just combine it all together, since all the news that we're talking about today is, it's all about MMOs. So today is a very MMO day. I have a rant planned today, 2 rants planned today, so I'll get out my soapbox during the soapbox segment, where I just kind of rant about whatever's on my mind. And then, of course, we have a weekly topic, just like every week, for the MMO Roundtable. The MMO Roundtable is a weekly council meeting of passionate but diverse MMO fans. We tackle a weekly subject for group discussion with enough perspectives, hopefully, to where we're likely to disagree, and that's always fun. Or at least, it should be. Each person gets, a couple of minutes to make their own case, and everyone goes in their own order. In the order that you raise your hand in, rather. And then once everybody says their piece, then we all open up the discussion to everybody. This week's topic or question is, should the term MMORPG be expanded? And what new terms should be erected? Explain. And then I said in parentheses for a little bit more information, if the term is not expanded, then many current MMOs, by the definition, would fail under the scrutiny the term MMORPG offers. Just to offer a little bit of backstory for what I was trying to get at there. Okay, so let's go ahead and let me move that out of the way, the current gaming news. Let's move that out of the way. Also, if you guys have anything that you would like me to react to ever, just feel free to talk to one of the moderators about dropping a link. Maybe an article or something that's on topic, or whatever else. The first thing I want to get out of the way is there's some new announcements for new projects, new MMOs, maybe in the process and work. And here we go. Klang raises $22.3 million for an MMO space colony simulation seed. Let me move this out of the way. So apparently, a company by the name of Klang Games has raised $22.33 million to fund a MMO dubbed Seed. This is a Berlin-based game studio. They're trying to make, as it says here, a persistent virtual world. I always take that with a grain of salt, but these days, if you use virtual world, unless the writer just used that himself, just trying to sound cool, usually means you have the right idea. So it talks about how they went about raising the money here, and it doesn't really give a whole lot of details about the game itself, but it says some investors like Lego know this isn't easy to pull off. Lego once had its own MMO, yeah, that's true, but rivals such as Roblox beat it. So apparently Lego is one of the companies that's funding this, which is even more interesting to me. And these are some screenshots, by the way, which are, unfortunately, I can't enlarge them. So I don't know if maybe I can find these online somewhere. But it's almost like they're going for like a second life, if that makes sense. Like the game Second Life seems like that. It says a global phenomenon of emergent gameplay is fantastic and aligns perfectly with our vision. So anytime you see someone talk about emergent gameplay, this is an educated person who understands video games, because he used the term virtual world already, which is a pretty niche word to use, but it's a correct one. And then he used emergent gameplay, which is also another good word to use in the context of an MMO that's supposed to be a virtual world, because emergent gameplay essentially means whenever you walk outside and there's an event going on, boom, that's the gameplay. That's the emergent gameplay. It's just happening. It's like the map is always reacting and constantly moving, and it creates more and more content, and it becomes this kind of like ripple effect of sorts. Yeah, it says right here, this is where people have mentioned the Second Life comparison. Seed is a online life simulator where each player manages multiple characters set in the far future. Players work together rebuild society and create a new home in a vast world similar to the Earth. The simulation is persistent and continuous, meaning that when the players go offline, their characters will continue to live their lives within the simulation. Well, now you're speaking my language. Now we're talking about simulations and juicy virtual worlds, which is the shit that I always love to talk about. Siege uses Improbable's spatial OS, a cloud platform. Okay, good to know. And Klang has 44 employees. I mean, just looking at the screenshots, it looks a lot more realistic to assume that this is more possible than, say, like Star Citizen or something that looks like incredibly like graphically insane, you know? Let's see if I can find any like screenshots about this game. I doubt I will be able to find anything. Yeah, it looks like they might have a teaser out. Let's go ahead and watch that. Pretty old though. This is a year old, so I don't know how current any of this is. Decent budget for something like that with a sensible team. Yeah, and Card, that's something that you and I talk about a lot, is like, if you can't make the grandest MMO, don't try, because you're gonna fail. And it sounds stupid to say that, but that's Shadowbane in a nutshell. These games that have such big, grand visions, but just can't accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, it's almost as if it's because when you don't have the resources, you shouldn't try to accomplish all of those things. I know it sounds screwed, because it's like, when you're an artist, you want to accomplish all of those things, but if you don't have the resources, you also have to temper your expectations. This looks a lot more tempered so far. Have you seen the fan-made Naxxramas trailer from 2017? It's not new, but it looks awesome. Go ahead and link it. If someone could give Scion Corp perms. Is there a way we can permanently give certain members of our Discord or Twitch chat permissions? Because people like Scion Corp post articles all the time, so I feel like he should just permanently have access. Carlo said, oh, what's up, Carlo? When is the deconstruction of Clean Prince Gaming, Legacy Killa HD, and the rest of the troop coming? We can get into some of that later on today, maybe near the end of the podcast, if people want to see me react to other criticism. If you guys ever want me to react to other criticism, first off, don't send me Joseph Anderson, and don't send me like good people like Reykjavik, like Indigo Gaming. Don't send me the good guys, right? Because I like their content, I'll watch it, but you know, come on, it's long form content, and I'm not gonna watch long form content of that I enjoy and try and like be critical of it. But there's plenty of content that I don't enjoy, just because kind of what it represents to me, which is just like low effort, low impact, you know, trendy, quote unquote, analysis. That's what triggers me the most on YouTube. And I think it's because inherently I get compared to those kind of people, because we might do something somewhat similar and that we cover like games that aren't doing well, right? But are we really that similar? No. The devil's in the details, right? All right, so speaking of new MMOs and new MMOs being funded, that's not where it ends. There's actually even another one. And I found this one on Reddit. Singularity 6, founded by ex-Riot Games developers, raises $16.5 million to create a virtual society MMO. Oh, we're hearing virtual used again. The reason why virtual is such a sexy word for investors is because a virtual world is the idea of a living, breathing world that continues whenever you log off of it. Imagine if a video game company could some way find a way to make money off of you not playing the game, or maybe another company could find a way to leverage the fact that they have a virtual game, maybe even put advertising inside of the game. Just like in the Second Life, there's too much possibility for revenue generation, but also just like interactivity. And when I say interactivity, I mean big companies want as much interactivity with a client or consumer as possible, because they want to know as much information about you as possible. So this is another thing like that goes about giving more or getting more information out there, so it's sexy to investors to think like, well, damn, another virtual world MMO, we could literally put our product in that game and see what happens. Or we could take an idea and just float it in there and see what people think about it. Or we could just, you know, offer advertisement in the way of, we're the ones that do cokes in that game. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many different ways to handle it because it's more realistic seeming. Singularity 6 is a company founded by Aidan Karabach and Anthony Luing, former lead developers at Riot Games. I probably butchered your name, so sorry guys. Today they announced that they had raised $16.5 million to develop a community simulation environment that emphasizes multiplayer and virtual community building in a stylized high fantasy world. Huh. So they're doing like the Second Life, but like a high fantasy version? I don't think I've ever seen that before. Influenced by games including Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley. It's almost like they're listening to the podcast. Because remember when Card and I were talking about you could take Stardew Valley and just put that in a fucking game and that would be a crafting system and a farming system? Boom, there you go. The near-term focus, is our first product, building a world that begins to tackle the community simulation space. More community simulation. I like to see community simulation because to me, that really is the future. It's getting out of games. Like, MMOs, the first, you know, couple of times made sense to put into a video game because we didn't have the technology needed to realize what we really wanted to realize. What we saw in the Matrix online, you know. Sorry, I meant the Matrix, but you guys know what I meant. Whenever they went into... Anyway. Too many puns there. While the co-founder did specify the Singularity 6 is a game and tech company, he didn't have much to say about what the tech is. Okay, so yeah, just virtual communities, virtual societies, these different words, like, that idea is more so in line with what I have as the ceiling, or the limitless ceiling, I should say, of the MMO genre. Really, it's just the ability that you could port into a game as yourself, but another character, and actually control your character with as much fidelity as possible. That eventually could be possible, right? We don't know how far along that is from now. We know virtual reality does exist, obviously. It's just not, you know, far enough along for where we would need it for an MMO. But creating a virtual world doesn't mean you just need virtual reality. Could be augmented reality. Could be other ways, just like the Second Life does it, where it allows you to have real estate and have a job and make money and purchase things and sell land and shit like that. Like, anything that can make you as a player or person invested more into your game on more than just a game level is what a virtual reality or virtual world or virtual whatever is trying to accomplish. It's trying to make you take it more serious than just, I'm playing a game, let me go get my set of gear. It wants you to think like, I'm playing this game, like, what would my character be doing right now? Like, you know, would I be fighting monsters over here? Would I be on some quest? Like, what would my character be doing right now? Big arcade announcement in 20 minutes. Ooh, maybe we'll have time to react to that. Can you guys keep me updated about that? A blockchain MMO. Now that'll get investors really drooling. Where's the League MMO that would make gangbusters? Yeah, I don't know. There's been rumors about it for a long time, but with the whole auto chess thing coming out, I doubt it really was an MMO that they were working on. This is a fan-made trailer? Hey, what's up, Rammies? Also, what's up, everybody? Huel, Ginger, Lempos, Card, Ludens. What's up, Alondris? Why did that sound like Yoda right there? You guys can't hear the audio? I wonder why. Oh, I know why. Because I always change the sound in my computer. Hold up. Dude, you guys have been missing it. Y'all have been missing it. Feels bad, man. Feels bad. Did I ignore you, Anbu? Did you already tell me that the sound was off and I didn't listen? Damn it! I ruined it for you guys. Y'all were missing like these awesome like track and like soundtrack it had going on. I use headphones and desktop sound, so sometimes I don't switch it and it doesn't switch automatically in my sound options.
No idea what horrors lie ahead. You have seen nothing. The frozen heart of Natsuramus awaits you.
Damn, man. That is really well done, dude. That's crazy. That's one of the best trailers I've ever seen in a MMO context. This is quite possibly one of the best trailers I've ever seen. Isn't it so funny that time and time again, fans have yet again proved that we're capable of doing really good shit? Well, it's almost as if, I don't know, 1 second, I wasn't trying to do that. It's almost as if, well, developers are fans, right? Developers are people too. What's the difference between a developer and another person? Well, they work on that game and the other person doesn't. So, yeah, most of the time that developer is going to have a lot more knowledge of how the inner working of, you know, certain games is going to work, right? Because they've operated with them. They've been behind the scenes. But every single time it's a battle of the community versus developers and making better content, the community wins. And the reason is, well, it's simple. The community has way more time. They don't need to worry about resources, which is probably one of the most important things, because they're not doing it for money. They're doing it for fun, for enjoyment. And also, there's a lot more of them compared to the amount of developers, and developers are having to fix and focus on other things. So it's just like, it's always bewildered me how afraid developers are of giving players more ways to affect things and make their own content within the game or with the game's assets. But like looking at the way that Blizzard handled YouTube videos and their content on YouTube videos, I think honestly is a big reason why that game blew up. Is like so many games were great, like bringing down content, you know, like they would copyright strike shit. They didn't want people showing videos, maybe. Nintendo's always been bad about that, but Blizzard, man, has always been pretty accepting with its YouTubers, its Twitch streamers, and that's how it built such a big audience. But anyway, beside the point, just saying, like, this is another example to me of, like, how the community can really just outperform even the professionals. The professionals, right? Because remember, the professionals are people too. It doesn't, just because they get paid to do it doesn't mean they're somehow infallible or better than everybody who doesn't get paid. It just means that on average they probably are, because they do it for a living. That's how you sell games. If only WoW was that epic, yeah. It's hard to match that level of excitement when your trailer's that good, right? There wasn't much information mentioned about that Singularity game, though, so that was kind of all we had to say. Just more people raising money, which means it's a number of years off. The Seed one looks like it's already been in production for, I think, 3 to 4 years. So that Seed one, man, that I got my eye on that one. I might even reach out to them to see if maybe I could talk to them, see what they're up to, or maybe even do an interview on stream or something. That would be cool. So I'll keep an eye out for those Seed guys and see if I can talk to the devs and maybe find out more information about it. All right, more MMO news. Speaking of ArcAge, somebody actually already mentioned it, but ArcAge has a bunch of tips, hits, you know, whatever. There's a mystery afoot, and ArcAge is, Tryon, I should say, is orchestrating something to do with ArcAge. People aren't exactly sure what it is, but it probably is another progression server or a classic server or some variation of like a less pay-to-win server. I want to be excited for the people who like that game, but at this point, I have such a bad taste in my mouth with ArcAge, and I have such a bad taste in my mouth with the developers behind ArcAge. It's kind of like, I don't even really have a shred of like positivity in what this announcement could be. Like, I am most likely going to assume it's going to be some kind of classic server or another progression server. And the reason why I'm not excited about that at all, despite me having told you guys before that I think ArcheAge has one of the best tab target combat systems I've ever personally played, ever. I had a max level character in that game and I enjoyed the game. I still thought it had a lot of flaws in some ways, but that's more so because it tries to be a sandbox and yet it doesn't quite do it all the way, if that makes sense. That was always one of my big criticisms of it. But anyway, I'm not very optimistic because Tryon hasn't had the best track record, and now that Gamago is owning them, I don't know if that's much better, you know? Like, I don't know if that means that that's going to be fixed, or if they're just yet finding another way to monetize this game one last time with one last push as they've handed the company off to this new company. Did I like it originally? I did. So I think that ArcheAge had really good combat, and I liked the way that their crafting system, and of course, the whole farming system and housing system, and forcing people to be out there in the world is just a good idea, period, but also a good idea for people like me, because I like that kind of immersion and also just interactivity in the world and more opportunities for PvP. But I did like it. I like that there was combos in that game, different skill systems, different specs. It was all fun and engaging. But once you get past the gameplay, many of the systems of that, or in that game rather, are so simplistic. And like a good example is, they've got the trade pack system, where you can take these trade packs to certain distances, and the further you take them, the more money you get from them. The problem is that the only time you can ever attack or do anything about the trade packs is when somebody has a trade pack on and they're enabled with it. And so it's just like, it's weird because sometimes people can hide with the guards when they have trade packs, and you can't really do anything with the trade pack itself. Sometimes you can't even steal it. It's like, it almost seems like it's like an idea of like, hey, let's do it like a trade pack where you go here and you attack. It's a cool idea, but past the first 10 times you do it, you know, what much else is there, I guess? Like, what much else is there past that? There's no more complexity in it. It's not like you can really create a trade empire and you know, stop trade in this area and, like, you know, really influence the way the world, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't really do anything like that. So it's more just, if the game, it's kind of like Black Desert Online in the sense that if the gameplay loop is good enough, a lot of Asian MMOs are like that. If the gameplay loop is good enough, you're gonna like it, and you're gonna like it as long as they don't make it pay to win. But, well, the problem is they often do, because of just the nature of those markets are different than our markets, and also, well, it makes a lot of money, so it's pretty successful. Can't forget the amazing idea for player justice system that pretty much max sentenced PvP players. I love the justice system, man. That's a great idea. And by the way, I don't have my detective mug today, but I do have a little smiley face mug, so. Maximum Asian monetization. The alpha of ArcheAge, no cash shop, was awesome. Hey, that's a good point, Sacriladius. I played the alpha, and I thought the same thing. I guess I didn't play with the cash shop as much as other people did, so that's not my memory of the game. But obviously, having done a death of a game on ArcheAge, it's most people's memory of the game. Having read through the hundreds of reviews about it and conversations and discussions and you name it. I love trade packs. As a guild, you filled up on a boat and you fended off the pirates. Yeah, exactly. And that's totally awesome and cool to me. But what do you do past that point? And how come you can't steal boats? You see what I'm saying? It's like, for me, it's like I have to suspend so much disbelief because they're trying so hard to make it seem like it is a sandbox game, and yet it isn't. Does that make sense? So let me find another way to explain it. It's like, a theme park game makes no qualms about just being like, we're a theme park game most of the time. Like, WoW isn't trying to pretend it's an open sandbox game. It doesn't try to pretend that. It's like, hey, we're a theme park game. Like, more, like, everything is kind of closed circuit. That's kind of how our game works. But in ArcheAge, it almost felt like the game was more open-ended. And so you're like, damn, it's more open-ended. It's kind of like a sandbox. So you actually start to have more expectations because you're like, well, I want to be able to, like, steal somebody's boat, or I want to be able to do this particular activity. But it's like, there's so many things in the game that are kind of like systems that maybe are fun and cool the first couple of times, but because there's not real consequence in them, like really taking a trade pack from somebody or really taking somebody's boat, it kind of just loses its fun for me after a while. I'm one of those people where, like, if a game has like too few circumstances where there's risk versus reward, and great risk and great reward, I kind of lose interest because it's like, I like the engagements where it's like, hey, my group, maybe we want to do a big raid boss or a big world boss pool real quick. This is risky though, because we could get ganked by other players, and if we die, then we lose all of that stuff as well in this game if it had full loot. So I like thinking of like risk versus reward. Like, we have 3 guys with us right now. We're wearing like decent gear. Should we go attack this other group of like 10 guys, but they don't know we're here? And we could at least kill 4 of them right away? Would we win that fight 3 versus 7? You know what I'm saying? Like, I like those kind of engagements, and not just PvP, but also PvE. What do you think of user-generated content in Neverwinter? As far as I could tell, aren't they getting rid of the Foundry system? So I know the Foundry system in Star Trek Online is, they got rid of that, the Foundry system. So I thought they got rid of the Foundry system in Neverwinter as well. So are they still letting you create they're axing it? So I mean, why would an MMO ever have the agenda of axing a system that's literally designed for players to create content for themselves, because developers can't do it, essentially. They don't have enough time or resources. Well, the only reason I could think to get rid of something like that is you don't want to support something that's basically not making you money. It's not making them money. They haven't found a way to monetize that, which, by the way, is idiotic that they can't figure it out. And I mean every MMO developer that can't figure out how to monetize roleplay. Come on, guys. Is it really that hard? It's almost like there's this thing with like 3, letters that gets uttered all the time, or, 3 little phrases, D and D, that exist. Like, role players make fuck tons of money off of that game. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the dice and environments and little models and things like that. There's so many ways to monetize roleplay, and yet they act like they couldn't monetize roleplay. They don't want to give you the tools to create your own content, because they're like, no. We want you to buy our story pack, not make your own. But it's like, but first off, you can't make enough story packs for me in the first place for me to keep playing the game. Second off, why not make me tools to make my own story pack, and then maybe sell me on new tools, and maybe that's the way you make money from it, instead of just making me get breadcrumbed to play your content, which might not even be good depending on the month it is, right? Because not everything is good. So maybe some months you get bad content, and it's so few and far in between that it's like, or far and few in between, sorry, that it really, really sticks out a lot more. Taxpayer made content. Like, I would monetize the living hell out of a player creation tool in my MMO. How can you not learn to monetize that shit? That's just what I tell myself that they can't figure it out, because I honestly don't know why they wouldn't then. Because I mentioned this whenever I went to PAX Unplugged, and I was looking around, and I've been to a couple other conventions since then, looking around on the floor and looking at all of the role players at their tables, and these big expensive, D&D tables, and these DM boards and screens and dice sets and dice holders and bags and backpacks and shirts and wristbands, and I mean, there's so much shit that you can buy at these conventions for D&D and roleplay. It's just almost like MMO developers, or maybe even the publishers, they're not realizing that. I don't think they haven't figured that part out yet, that actually role players are okay with buying costumes, but that's not where it ends. You guys are only like getting into like the little bit of what role players like to spend money on. They like to spend money on a lot more vanity than that. Mounts and skins are just the beginning, I think. That's the lazy shit. Don't forget the actual rule sets and plus adventure models. That's a good point. And I think that should get mentioned, that if you could affect a module in a way that you could actually affect the rule set in it, well, then now you're literally adding more complexity and more content to the game in a way that even maybe the developers couldn't. Because you could design your own rule set and system to play a particular, module or whatever else your own way. It's just like, there's so many things that go into that. And I'm not going to sit here and say that like module-based gameplay is the best. I kind of think that module-based gameplay maybe doesn't have the most place in a MMO or a virtual world, but I like module-based gameplay because I love Neverwinter Nights, so I'm very familiar with that kind of gameplay and Divinity and old school CRPGs. I like that style of game. It's so buying your own tools is actually, there's a pretty simple answer for that. Whenever a painter finds out about a new style of painting, the art institute that he goes to or works for or whatever else doesn't just give him the new painting tools. He has to go buy them anyway. So it's like, even though you're an artist, most of the time you have to spend money to make art anyway. Like, most of the time you're spending money to make art. So I don't think people would have a problem with you having to spend money to make more art or make more content. In fact, I think if you even had a subscription service that you could charge for people who would use such a system, I think there's a good percentage of people who would be willing to pay a subscription for that. I am one of them. I am one of those people. I would pay a sub fee if you gave me some way to like create my own modules within the game, some way to create my own quest, some way to create my own like my own events or something. You know what I mean? Art is expensive. It shouldn't be cheap. I agree with that. I spent $0 so far on all of my art. Yeah, I mean, there is ways to make free art, especially digital. There is more money in whales than there is in 100 kit sales. Someone did probably calculate that, and also games have to have an exit door so they can be replaced and they can sell the same stuff over again. So actually, you know what? For a quick second, I'm gonna move this current gaming news out of the way. I'm gonna rant just a little bit. I'm not gonna pull out the soapbox yet, but I thought of a point the other day where the biggest reason that a developer doesn't want you to have the tools, or a publisher doesn't want you to have the tools to be able to create your own content, is because they've chosen a different content model. They've chosen a model where you front load everything, where it's like you give as much content up front as possible, and then you breadcrumb them. So you just slowly give them more and more and more and more story. The problem with this is that it literally becomes a race to the finish, because you just want to race to the end to experience all the story as fast as possible because it's front-loaded, and then you end up being bored out of your mind because you're waiting for the next content update to come. What if instead of making it a race to the finish, because you're literally designing your content to be consumed in a linear path where you just go straight through the content, what if you had questing and stories that were more open-ended? And say, for example, using Asheron's Call, what if you said that there was a threat that was about to attack this given city and you had to find out the clues about this threat? And maybe there was multiple quest lines that go into that, but they're not just like, conveniently located on the map for you to find. So you actually would have to go out in the world, look for it, and figure out, how does this impact me? Like, where are these characters at, right? And experience that story on your own. And then from that perspective, you feel like you're part of the story, and you actually feel a lot more into your character than you would otherwise, because in any story, you think about a story, you don't just become the hero, right? It never really works like that. Like, you can become a hero in a story, but you don't just become the hero right away. It doesn't work like that. A lot of like MMOs, I think, kind of have a problem with that, because the leveling process is just a nuisance. Leveling is so meaningless. It's almost like becoming max level is meaningless, because you're like, but everybody's max level, so how am I really even more powerful or different than they are when, they're kind of the same as me? So like, I think that sorry, someone added me. What you're talking about could happen in Vampire the Masquerade 2 or Cyberpunk 2077. Glass is a weird material once it gets semi-liquid. It is. It's a good point. I don't know why. By God, you're the Dragonborn. Yeah, exactly. Making you the centerpiece of the story is one of the worst things they can do for longevity. Let me repeat that. Making you as the player in a MMORPG the center focus point for the story, meaning it is about you, the hero, they drastically hurt their longevity as a game. Because what they're doing by that nature is literally turning their MMO, which theoretically speaking is an open circuited game, right? Because of all the player interactions and the moving pieces, and making it a closed circuit one. And you saw SWTOR do this over the course of their years of development. They got rid of open world PvP. They got rid of like the majority of raiding in any serious capacity. They got rid of the need to group for certain things. They added hard difficulties, so most people can just beat all of the storylines without having to worry about difficulties if you just want to engage in the story. Like step after step after step, those steps make your game, your MMO, more and more closed-circuited. And while that could provide a more upfront, better experience, because just like when I walk into McDonald's, it's a chain restaurant, so it works effectively, right? Because it's a process, it's a system, if that makes sense. But the problem with that is that when I'm tired of eating that same shit, that same McDonald's, and I realize what it's made out of, and I realize the ingredients aren't so good, and it ain't so healthy for me, well, then all of a sudden I'm like, well, McDonald's ain't so appealing to me anymore. Maybe instead of McDonald's, the mass, public burger, I want more of a niche product. Maybe I want like Five Guys, or I don't know. Maybe I want local shops here in Austin, like, P. Terry's or something. Maybe I want these like specific shops. And that's kind of what happens is you narrow down your interest as you realize you don't just like everything. But with making you the center focus of the story makes it to where you're breadcrumbed. You have to wait for that next breadcrumb to be dropped by the developer. So until then, you can't pass. You can't pass the proverbial story wall, right? You can't pass it until they provide more story on the other side. So you're literally closing off your own system, right? But what if every month instead, you made quests on a more monthly basis? You made story unfold over a year, 2 years, 3 years. The genius of this is that you can charge a sub fee. You can slowly unveil your own narrative, but also give players to create their own, which is emergent gameplay, which creates more replayability in your content. And then on top of that, with the replayability, you also have a shelf life on your game, which sounds strange, but hear me out. Instead of just like burning your audience until they die and then your game dies, which is how these theme park games work, they burn their audience to keep spending money so I can keep making content. And then once the audience like fades away, there's no more audience. It's just, that's kind of how the game goes. It dies so quickly because it needs a constant audience to keep it afloat. That works when you're at the top, but it doesn't work for the vast majority of the other games. The other games, which don't have the budgets to match that of ZeniMax and Square Enix and Blizzard and NCSoft, you don't have the budgets to match those games, you have to make a different game. You can't keep making the same game. And I think people realize that, developers realize that from 2007 all the way to 2011, because all of these failed games, well, they violated that. They front-loaded all of their content, everybody completed it right away, and then they were like, all right, just wait for the next expansion in like 2 years. And everyone's like, bruh, there's like 2 raids. Like, what the fuck is all the content? Like, dude, I'm max level. What the hell is there to do in this game? Like, I remember people saying all of these kinds of things when I would be playing MMOs, and it's like, they made it a race by making it closed off, if that makes sense. Like, by closing the story to just your character, the chosen one, you've locked the doors in. Now I'm in the theme park. And now I'm forced to wait on developers to feed me the next crumb of story, the next content. Please give it to me. If I don't have it, it's not enough. I just think that that's not sustainable. And so many case studies back that up, that for the vast majority of developers and publisher relationships, it's not sustainable. It might be a lot more sustainable to actually have content that's maybe open-ended and the story or the narrative is not so personally focused, but more so world focused. Because you can still have personal story in a world story. A good example of this is Lord of the Rings has very good world story. Some of the best. I mean, possibly the best. Tolkien wrote an iron-tight book. An iron-tight world, I should say. It's just, everything has an explanation. Everything has a meaning in his world. I know I've tried. I've tried poking holes in a lot of different things. He was pretty damn good at that, especially for how long he worked on it and how old the books are now and the world is now. But that being said, one of my biggest problems with Lord of the Rings has always been it is a completely contained story in the sense that there's not a whole lot left up to the imagination. So it's like, in Lord of the Rings, though, even though it's a contained story, there still is world story, right? The world story still exists and it affects everybody. Sauron is this evil being, the Eye, and Mordor, and Isengard, and the orcs are moving, and all of that stuff matters, right? All of that matters. But so does, Bilbo, or so does Frodo. Their story matters. Or Legolas' story still matters. His individual story still matters. You remember the characters, you remember their individual story. Not every single character in The Lord of the Rings is the chosen one. Wouldn't you agree? Not all of them are the chosen one. Because there can't be like 16 chosen ones, because it doesn't make for a good story. So maybe Frodo's the chosen one, but not everybody else is the chosen one. And that's just like a big thing I wanted to rant about quickly is, I used to get told all of the time online, people on forums, by developers, and it just kind of became common sense arguments, which is just like, nobody actually verifies it, but it sounds like it makes sense. But people would say all of the time, like, oh, well, developers make content like this with expansions and front-loaded because it just makes more money. These theme park games just make more money, and it's like, I'm starting to realize that's not really true. It might be true in some cases, but in the vast majority of cases, it's been proven to be not true. Because, well, so many games have failed trying to do it in that way. And yet more have succeeded in not doing it that way. So it's kind of like, you think about that, theme park should be easier, right? Based on it being more contained and things. But is it more easier? Or does it actually cost more money? Well, if developers are constantly putting out top trailers and raids and massive marketing pushes for expansions and all of this stuff, that cost a lot of money just for advertising alone. Just for advertising alone, you're talking millions of dollars. So now that we've got those $1 million out of the way, now let's actually spend the money on our programmers, artists, amount of time to work on this. You see my point? But in a sandbox game, the players are doing all of that. The players are making the quests. The players are making the gear. The players are making the events, right? And so you can circumvent a lot of that work power, I should say, or not work power, but like, I guess the word would be that work rate. You don't need that crazy work rate to constantly be churning out new content. Instead, you can focus on maybe other things like fixing the game, or balancing the game, or fixing existing systems, or maybe expanding on existing systems. And then you expand your game from the core up instead of the other way, if that makes sense. Real life theme parks don't want people building their own rides in it. That's a good point, Alanos Born. That's a quote right there. Real life theme parks don't want people building their own rides in it. They want you to have their rides. They want you to do their experience. Players can be unreliable, which is why I'm not of the perspective that because developers have all of these problems I just mentioned, we should just give it all to players. Because some people actually make that argument, or they defend their game because the developers don't actually do shit. So I'm going to split hairs and say, why not both? Why not give players the tools, but also tell your developers to also use their tools? Like, why wouldn't they? You don't just say, well, hey, players got that shit covered, man. Let's do nothing now. Like, we're not Skyrim. Like, we're an MMO, so you still have to keep developing the game. Like, it's not like you can just let the players fix your game. It doesn't really work like that because you are still the developer at the end of the day. So you still have to be involved. It's just you don't have to be nearly as much involved in day-to-day, story-to-story interactions. And you also can know that whenever you release a new content update, if you introduce a new feature or gameplay aspect into the game, that aspect itself is going to have a way longer shelf life than a single quest line in Battle for Azeroth or SWTOR or you name it, right? The amount of resources, time, and effort that goes into creating a raid is astronomical. And yet, how much resources go into creating a system that allows you to create a raid? Probably a lot. but then you could create more raids for cheaper. So like, it actually would be more content over time. But again, we come back to the why don't people do it? Well, most of the time the answer is all right, so let's get into some of our classic WoW news for today, since we did have a couple of bits I wanted to get to. Also, a reminder for everybody, the MMO Roundtable will happen after the MMO round of news, no pun intended. So if you'd like to join me in answering that question we mentioned earlier about the MMORPG term and if it needs to be expanded, you can go ahead and join the podcast lobby right now. Card is currently in the podcast lobby. It's lounging, so go ahead and join the podcast lobby. I will join you guys shortly if you would like to engage in the discussion. Remember, this is in Discord using the voice comms. If you don't have the ability to use voice comms or log into Discord, you can just wait until after everybody in Discord has said their piece, because then we open it up to the players to kind of all, have a discussion amongst each other, and then we open it up to the chat and the floor. So sometimes I read some of your questions and your opinions, so don't feel like you can't be involved in the discussion because you're not in chat, is what I'm trying to say. You can still chat in Twitch if you're at work or wherever you're at. I get it, because I used to watch at this exact time right now, and Ludens can back me up because I know he watched him as well. I used to watch I'm a Cutie Pie all the time during lunch. Right at this time, right now, I would watch I'm a Cutie Pie play League of Legends whenever I would be working in construction. So I'd have my like burrito like on my lunch break eating, and I'd be watching him play League at my job, So I know what it's like to watch podcasts or watch people play Twitch or play video games on Twitch whenever you're at work on your lunch break or whatever else. All right, so first let me get to the juicy bits. Let me open all of these open. That was redundant, but you get my point. Hey, finally, I'm seeing some sort of advertisement. Apparently in Atlanta, this has come up on the bus. Yay! Hooray! Finally, Blizzard has done some semblance of advertisement. They've put up an ad at a bus station. I say that in jest because I do wonder why they haven't done more advertisement, but then I think about Asmongold and I'm like, probably because he's done it already for them. There's been some news that has come out about the realms in WoW Classic apparently being like massively overcrowded. And I know most people probably took this into consideration already. Like they already thought this was going to happen. You predicted this. But it's like getting insane. Apparently the realm Herod is going to be massively overpopulated to the tune of an excess of 10,000 players. 10,000 players logged in to reserve their names. More than 10,000, players logged in already to reserve their names. And so they're opening up another PvP realm, Stalag, and they're trying to get people to like, transfer over. This shit just cracks me up, guys, because there's a really good meme on the WoW Classic subreddit. If one of you guys find this meme, I will give you like the deepest fedora tip you've ever seen in your life. But I think it's in the WoW Classic subreddit. So that subreddit is called Classic WoW, and it's a meme where it's a bunch of the Tom Cruise laughing pictures where he's like laughing from the set whenever he was on Oprah. It's a meme of him laughing at all of the comments saying, you think you do, but you don't. And then it's a bunch of people posting on the forum saying, the game's going to die. It's not really that popular. Nobody's going to want to play it. Everyone's going to quit automatically. And it's like a really funny meme, but it's really pertinent at this moment because it's just like, we've been trying to tell people for years now, hey, private servers exist, guys. I mean, since I can remember. I have been playing with MMO players since the dawn of time, really. Who would be surprised when I would mention a private server? These are guys who've played MMOs for such a long time, and I'd be like, yeah, like private server. Like private server, huh? What's a private? So it's like, what if they just hack you? You know, like they still think like that kind of shit. You're like, dude, private servers have been existing for such a long time. Like, I know you might not think they exist or maybe forgot they existed, but maybe do a little bit of research before we ask the question that's already been answered like 60 billion times, which is, well, is there going to be enough interest in WoW Classic? Guys, that question was already answered. So this shouldn't be surprising if you've been following the private server scene. And that's what I'm here to do, is to tell people about the private server scene, because I feel like that's my realm, right? I'm the YouTuber or MMO guy who's always talking about the private servers, because, well, most of the old MMOs are, these days, private servers. You think you want good pizza, but you don't. You think you want good pizza, but trust me, dude, you don't really want good pizza. It's like, yeah, I do. In fact, I want more. Give me some more. So many of these private servers are also older versions that people wanted or liked. I can see a huge market for classic variants or voted for popular versions of MMOs. I think so as well, and that's a good point. There could be a lot of MMOs, but that have a similarity to WoW in the sense that they could have a big private server audience, but they just also don't have the audience period that WoW does, or the same fervor from the fans to want to keep it alive or keep a version of the game alive. Because, like Rippy said, there's Wrath of the Lich King versions of WoW. There's Cataclysm versions of WoW. I saw a Mist of Pandaria server. Like, I mean, I don't know why, but that WoD servers exist. Of course, Classic and TBC servers are the most popular servers. I wonder why. You get my point. What else was I going to mention about that? Oh yeah, so somebody wrote up a little nice post on Reddit about this that I just wanted to kind of react to. I really hope, and this is from user Zimtars, I really hope Classic WoW is a kick to the industry. With Classic WoW just a few weeks away, I'm probably not the only one hoping it's a ridiculously huge success. WoW has added more and more shitty systems that rip apart community and simplify things to a point where the modern game is more like an arena boss fighter than an actual world. And the big problem is every other MMORPG has copied all of their terrible mistakes over time. Every game has daily shit, every game has dungeon finder, every game is piss easy and mindless until you hit the peak of the end game, where it's finally challenging. Truth be told, I'm not even going to play Classic WoW. I'm burnt out on the game. What I'm hoping is that it does show that there is a gigantic market of people who want a challenge from start to finish, who don't need standardized, boring item level loot and classes to have all the same exact level power in every encounter. I'm kind of skipping ahead here, but the absolute dream here is that it's a huge success and Blizzard keeps the ball rolling by modifying future expansions to be more classic style, and it turns into a progression server with a classic feel. Or it even adds onto the base game over time with a completely new classic content. Obviously, people are going to be bored of Molten Core and the same raids if that's all they plan to do. RuneScape is seeing a big success here, and WoW needs to do what everyone else has been doing to them for years and copy that shit. I agree. I thought that was a good point, and I like that. What I liked about this post was that he's not even going to play the game himself, but he still can recognize the impact. And I think that's just what I ask of people the most. Is like, don't close your ears and la 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 classic WoW la 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 la. Don't do that, all right? Like, if you don't want to play it, I get it. If it's not for you, I totally get it. But open your eyes actually and, like, you know, listen. Like, you might actually be able to learn something or see something new come to fruition because of Classic WoW having a resurgence. I'm telling you guys, it's going to happen. That's just how innovation works. Innovation works in almost like backwards sometimes. It's like innovation happens, everybody copies it, streamlines it. Innovation kind of subsides for a little, subsides for a little bit, but then boom, somebody breaks the barrier again and innovates. And then somebody else starts innovating. But sometimes a classic developer or an old school developer or even an old school product gets resurrected, and it actually shows everybody that it's still good enough to go head to head with current day products. And this exists, by the way, out there in the world. You can find this in many different realms and products, but we haven't really seen it a whole lot in the MMO realm, like never on a high profile state that we've seen with like RuneScape and now with Classic WoW. And I think RuneScape personally already has had a huge influence on games. Look at Albion Online and tell me that game isn't its wannabe son. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't deny the impact that RuneScape and old school RuneScape and its recent resurgence with the mobile market has had on the market. Just period. And so it's like, no matter what your opinion is, whether you like classic WoW, whether you think it, like, don't think about, is it going to work right now? Because it is. Think about, is it going to work over time? After this point, when the content's dried up? That's a fair question. But I think a lot of the vitriol about it comes from like this weird perspective of like, oh, well, I like this other kind of game and I don't like WoW or classic WoW, so this game is like threatening to my game. It's like, I don't understand why you're threatened by it that much if it's not your kind of game. If you want to go play Final Fantasy 14 or Guild Wars or whatever game, then go play those games. Why are you so offended that people want to play old MMOs? It's almost as if maybe there's a reason for that? Huh? Maybe? Maybe you're starting to figure it out? Bam, bam, bam. If it prevails, all the Kickstarter MMOs out there like AOC, Crowfall, Hytale, and etc. might find it easier to get investors. Is Hytale a Kickstarter MMO? Because I don't believe it is. It's being created by one of the, you know, at this point, richest companies in gaming, I feel like. One of the richer companies in gaming. I'm not going to play Classic either, says Sacriletius, but I do see that it will have an impact, be it positive or negative. I'm not sure yet. Interesting. I don't think any of us can say for sure if it's going to be positive or negative. We just know it's going to change. At least they don't deter people from posting in ruined threads. That's a difference. Karma System removes stuff that the general public disagree with, no matter the quality of the post. That's how echo chambers are formed. This is true, actually. And funny enough, this is actually related to my rant topic today. So nice segue, Limpos and Ludens. Big brain Denmark guys, because actually that's what I'll get into right now. I'm going to do this rant really quickly. Well, I'm going to do one of these rants now, and then I'm going to do the MMO Roundtable, so bear with me. So I know that Ludens probably follows me on Reddit because he knows where I'm going with this. I swear, dude. You must follow me because you know where I'm going with this. All right, let me change this title really quickly to Soapbox so you guys know I'm on my emotional shit. I'm on my soapbox shit. Okay, so I was randomly reading a thread and I saw this, okay? I was like, oh, that's cool. It's Mark Kern, you know? One of the producers who worked on Classic WoW had his own item. I was like, that's cool. And then I was like, and then I remember, you know, of course, Mark Kern is the lead developer and co-founder that was behind Firefall. So that's how he kind of rings a bell to me. So I scroll down here. Oh, by the way, let me mention the other context. I did a video on Firefall. Feel free to go watch that video if you haven't already. In that video, what I discovered was that we had a CEO who seemed to be kind of like a megalomaniac. He had control issues. He was constantly coming in and berating people, telling people to completely undo things that they were working on, telling them that it wasn't good enough. All of a sudden, he would stop coming to work. He would have like early morning meetings where he would basically just talk about himself. These are all things I've covered in the video. Also, he designed a bus or had a bus design that cost $4 million or some shit like that to make. And he was, or like $2 or $3 million to make. Sat in a fucking garage, by the way. Nothing ever became of that. And then he also formed a production company with a full professional level camera crew, which for people in chat who don't know what a full camera crew cost, I'll just ask one of the tech nerds in chat to explain it. But like, Card, how much would a full camera crew cost? Cameras, mics, you name it. Just give me a ballpark. I know it's a lot of zeros, right? It's a lot of zeros. It's a lot of money. Camera equipment and a full equipment for a production studio is a lot of money. So he put all of that money into making a production studio. And you want to know the kind of shit that they were making in this production studio? Well, don't worry. I'm going to show you. Because it's fucking hilarious. That's not it. Let's see. Where is this article? I think the guy that I was talking to deleted it. Or he might have deleted the post. Or let me see if I can find the context of it. How do you click the parent thread? There it goes. All right. So check this out. This is hilarious, by the way. But after all of that stuff I just said, and feel free to go form your own opinion. I don't want you to just take my word for it. I saw that people had this like really positive opinion of Mark Kern. I found that interesting. They're like, man, Mark Kern, original developer who helped make classic a reality. Wow. What a powerful claim. This is a guy who helped make classic a reality. Damn. So not only did he help create the original WoW, as he, you know, and everyone is saying, he helped bring classic, right? Like he's the bringer of classic. Wow. This guy is incredible. Or is he an abusive megalomaniac who single-handedly tanked his own studio and then continued to disagree with people even after his failures? And so I went through this like rabbit hole where I was like, wait a minute, we're in a WoW discussion. I'm hearing about Mark Kern, and I'm hearing people talk about him like he was this like bringer of classic. And you know what Mark Kern said, not ironically? He genuinely believes that he created quest bubbles. Like, he wasn't even a developer, guys, on WoW. He was a producer. He didn't even do development. But he's claiming that he invented the quest log? Like, what? And then, like, now he's claiming that he's our big reason that Classic became a reality? Just because he had people sign on a petition sheet? That's what you guys think made them do Classic WoW? Like, what about all the people playing it? I just don't get why we're giving all of this credit to this person who essentially, right now, is kind of acting like a tourist, even though he kind of was not really involved in as much as he is letting on. And so I got into some long discussion and debate with a guy who apparently maybe had a disagreement with that. The interesting thing that I found is immediately you can see that I'm downvoted on all of my posts. Like, all of my posts here are downvoted. Every single one of them. Now, mind you, they're not downvoted a lot. I think the most one's like -4 or 5, right? But it's like, this I can see is part of the problem with Reddit. And I'll actually even just show you guys exactly like our discussion if I can remember how to fucking use this damn thing. I use Reddit mostly on my phone, so I'm not used to using it in this context. All right, so what I found interesting about this guy was that he was so confident, right? And sure. And so I thought, man, like Reddit is a good place to be able to make point-by-point arguments because it has a quote feature. You can put quotes in it. You can have quotes and you can respond in between quotes. But the problem with Reddit and Reddit in MMO discussions is people don't actually care about the truth. So like, here's an example. He says that I ignored the parts where he mentioned that West Coast Customs botched things, went over budget, and delivered the van late and missing some of its key features. But one thing that I found interesting about this claim is him saying that I ignored the part where they mentioned this is that, well, first off, I didn't, right? There's no way to know that I ignored this claim. Second off, if I just Google this quote, which is not very difficult to do, I can find, sorry, let me, there. I can find where it's referenced, see? Boom. I found 2 references. All right, so let's see. Where is that post? Okay, here we go. So here's another post of this article, by the way. Chinese game developer, the 9, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so here's the beauty of the story. Look, you see this big ass, bus right here? This is the Firefall bus we're talking about. Mark Kern, who was the co-founder of Red 5 and Firefall, lead developer to Firefall, thought it would be a great idea to create a giant bus where you could just bring it up to LAN events and you could play the games there. It sounds like a cool idea, right? If I told you, though, that it costs 30 grand, you'd be like, that's pretty cool, right? 40 grand? 50 grand? 100 grand? 1 million? 2 million? 3 million? Wait a minute. Why would you ever think it'd be worth millions, period? Because the thing is here is, the argument is that this bus is made as a means of, advertisement, right? Bringing advertisement. And the claim this guy makes is that, well, it's because the van didn't work. That's why it's a problem, right? He's like, you ignored that. That's why it's a problem, because the van wasn't up to standards. It's like, well, do you think he figured out that it cost 3 million after or before? I'm just curious. Like, how do people think this shit works? Do you think people just like Limpos is works in machinery? Do people just hand in shit, do all of the work and labor, and then tell you how much it is? I mean, I've never heard of it working that way. So sorry, maybe I need to suspend my disbelief to believe that it would work that way. I don't think it works that way. And so it gets even juicier, because you might think that this, well, that's a good idea, right? Well, first off, they spent millions on it, resources on it. It literally sat in a fucking garage and collected dust. So what's even hilarious about it is, here's Mark's own opinion of it. The bus was terrible. Now that I am not at Red 5, I can say that they did not deliver what was wanted, and it was way over budget. So that quote that guy just said, that he was telling me that I ignored, here's the hilarity of it, guys. Let me go big screen so you realize this reveal. It's from the guy. It's from the guy that is being accused. You want me to take the guy who's being accused of being a shitty developer, his opinion, as law, when he's the one that all of these other people, employees, the articles, journalists, players, are accusing of doing this? It's like, what? I don't understand that, dude. Of course he's going to say that. Why the fuck wouldn't he say that? Why wouldn't he say it was a bad bus? Why wouldn't he say it didn't work? Or why would he not? Why would he say it worked? If he thought it was a massive mistake, why would he own up to it if he's not the kind of person to own up to it? Well, it's almost like he wouldn't. And that's my argument, is this guy wouldn't own up to that. And you can tell I'm getting a little bit annoyed. It's because I don't like this guy, Mark Kern. I'll be honest. I see him on Reddit and fucking Twitter all the time, dude. He's a know-it-all. He acts like his shit doesn't stink. He takes credit for shit that he didn't even fucking do. And then he acts like he's never made fucking mistakes and his shit don't stink. Well, I'm here to tell you guys, that ain't true. That's what my job is here to do, okay? That shit ain't fucking true. What he did is, he went on to create beautiful videos like the one I'm about to show you with all of his resources with the company. Check this out. I gotta find this for you guys. I'm going through my history. Can't let you guys look at it because you'll see all my porn. Just kidding. I watch too many podcasts. I'm looking back at this shit. Too many jujitsu videos. Where is this damn thing? I gotta find this damn thing. It'll literally drive me insane if I can't find it. It's so, like, trust me, guys, when I find this for you, if you haven't already seen it, it is so fucking funny, dude, that they created this shit. And somebody would ever defend the people who would create such a thing. You know what? I might be able to actually just search for it. I'm gonna search Winterfell rap. Okay, here we go. I'm slowly finding it. Notice anything funny? Maybe down over here?
Welcome to King's Landing, a city of
Anyone notice anything weird about this?
Do be careful, 'cause shit's about to get
I'm curious. Does anybody else see anything wrong with this? Why the fuck is this on the Firefall channel? For the game Firefall? Like, what the fuck? What is this shit, dude? And then, like, just look at the videos in this channel. It doesn't take a genius to like, wonder, what the fuck were these guys doing? What was Mark doing? Well, I kind of have at least an idea of what he was doing. He's like a kid with a lot of money and a lot of resources making whatever the fuck he felt like making, essentially, is what he would do. He'd be like, well, let's just make a Hodor remix.
You want to write a song?
For independence, it's a glorious day. 'Cause I'm married for love, and it's cool with the phrase. Yeah, we're heading to a wedding, gonna party today. And I'm gonna be a
He's doing this shit while he's making Firefall, and Firefall's failing, by the way. The game isn't even out yet, and he's doing this shit. Let me say that again. The game wasn't even out yet. The game wasn't even out yet, and he was doing this shit. What more do I need to fucking say about this shit? The game wasn't fucking even out yet, dude. Like, I don't know what it is with this dude, but he just weirds me out, man. He really does just strike me as a megalomaniac. Somebody who's just obsessed with having power and always taking credit for shit. But look at this. Again, you can verify what I'm saying. I'm not saying anything that can't be verified. Initial release date, 2014. When's the date of this video? 2013. It was literally right before, dude. What the fuck are you doing? As a developer, what are you doing? Why are you spending all of this money? Why are you spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on this shit? What does this even have to do with Firefall? It doesn't even have anything to do with Firefall. There's even more videos though. That's the sad part, guys, is the videos are hidden. Look, you can't even see them on the channel. I'm about to show you guys detective magic. You ready? Watch this. You see this? Like, I don't see where it's at, but it's almost as if I have saved all of this shit before, so I'll just go fucking find it. Unlisted. I found another one. March 4th, 2013. A couple of months before the previous video.
Have you procured the item I require?
And I thought it was only me. Then, like the lions and vultures, came together 1 year at Comic-Con. All around us, orcs, X-Men, Thundercats, we weren't alone. Now we found our home.
By the way, if anyone ever shows you this, Mark Kern, and you ever want to have a chat, buddy, you know where to find me. I know you don't want to chat. Oh shit, dude. This shit is just fucking amazing, dude. But it's like, look at this guy's just profile, man. Like, team lead for vanilla World of Warcraft. Do you see how he puts team lead in there as well? It's just like, it's crazy, man. This guy will literally post 30 billion times a day, taking credit for just about everything in the fucking world you could imagine. And people are eating that shit up because he was an original developer, quote unquote. developer. Just like doesn't this guy stream as well? Doesn't he stream on Twitch or some shit? Yeah, he does. Coincidentally, he started streaming whenever WoW Classic started to become a thing. Strange. It's almost like it's fucking advertisement for him. There's more of these. Let's find more. Let's find more. Okay. Check this out.
Okay, pack up.
No, this is not it. I think this is it.
Admiral Nostromo? We found something you need to see.
They created a bunch of live action
tracker's
trailers and
online,
a bunch
sir.
of live
You should have
action
the affidavit
footage
up on your
for
SIM.
Firefall. And all of it was specifically created, obviously, to be advertisement for the game. So think about this. This guy's creating live action trailers, regular video game trailers, a video game, whatever the fuck the other shit that I just showed you guys was, and how any of that was fucking related, I have zero idea. And he was doing all of that with the company dollar meant to be spent by the Chinese, I believe, sorry, I don't want to be racist here, the Asian company, I can't remember off the top of my head which company it was that had given them money and funding to make MMOs. Essentially, some like rich Asian company or dude was just like, here you go, here's a shit ton of money, Red 5, go make a bunch of shit. Like, make us a cool game, like a badass game. That didn't happen, man. What he instead did was make shit like this while he was making the game.
Now we open Harry Potter movie nights. Oh,
It's like, what I love about videos like this is I don't even have to make an argument. I could just show it to somebody.
together, join the team. I'll show you what it means.
Was it Garena, dude? Oh no, Garena, they got fucked. That money ain't ever coming back, right? All right, let's find some more juicy Firefall things. All right, so what did Mark Kern say after he tweeted about the bus and people gave him shit about the bus? Well, I mean, it's almost as if I could figure this out. It's almost as if you can find a Megalomaniac's post on the internet because he can never shut the fuck up, so he always has to have something to say. Mark Kern, ex-R5 CEO, tweets about the bus. Bus, they scream at me. Bus, LOL, dude, it's a bus. Get over it. Step away for 10 minutes, come back, and still see SJW shouting bus. Yes, public transportation is good, you hipsters. They are all mad that I bought a bus and kept shouting it. They think buying a bus makes you Satan or something. Yet we refuse to pay for it because the vendors fucked it up. This is the only claim that this comes from is him, by the way. There's no other source. Feel free to find it on the internet, guys, but no other source says the vendors fucked it up except him. I assume it's in storage or parted out by now. Don't know, but buses cost $1 million new. I spent $2 million to customize it, a used bus, and got $4 million. There's no confirming of this $4 million's worth of advertisement. It's literally a fabricated number that people like him are amazing at fabricating because they're good at bullshitting. Word salad, they call it. My name is Mark Kern, and I am a bus lover. Somehow spending $2 million on a bus featured in a TV show and get $4 million in advertising and everybody talking about it was bad marketing. It never worked, dude. It didn't work. And 50% return for advertising wouldn't even be that good. 20 gaming stations, full data center in the rear, capable of hosting 3,000 players at a LAN built in a streaming studio. 30-page defect report on WoW. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay. Yeah. 30-page defect report that I didn't show you guys for some reason, or didn't like post a link of, even if it was just a screenshot. The idea was to take the bus on a year-long tour across the US and reduce our costs at trade shows. Trade shows are for AAA gaming are 1 to 2 million each show, so this would have been a lot cheaper. No, it wouldn't have been. There's no way he can confirm that it would have been cheaper. There's no way, dude. There's no way he would know. He doesn't have that evidence. He can't make that argument. He was wrong, so of course he can't make the argument. He talks about, man, they really hate that bus. Getting more bus SJW. Look, he throws in the SJW. SJW hate tweets. Dude, it's just a bus. Really? A bus. We had to scrap it after 2 shows and refused to pay for the balance when we discovered how... So they didn't even pay for it to make it even better. They didn't even pay for it. That's the even better part, dude. And he's happy about that. He's proud of it. The best part, every time an SJW cries bus, they raise the value and promote Firefall. SJWs are realizing that the bus made money and are getting pissed. Love it. I know they're going to block you so you can't see, but it's glorious. It was late by nearly a year. They committed to 2 trade shows and missed both deadlines. Now SJWs are saying, okay, the bus made money, but the game flopped. Dude, I wasn't there for the launch, and they changed the whole game. Don't blame it on me. Not my fault. I wasn't there. Sorry, but that's like literally what the equivalent of it is to me. I have never a single time seen Mark take fault for Firefall. I have never, that's why it pisses me off, dude. I've never seen him take fault. I've never seen a developer in such a high profile failure double down on his bus decision, double down on his production decisions, double down on him not showing up to the office, and then he even doubles down and blames it on other people. That's the even better part. It's like, he doesn't just double down and be like, nah, I disagree, or nah, this ain't true. He goes, this ain't just not true. Everyone who said it is wrong. It's like, dude, that's a pretty fucking hard claim to make, right? I was looking for something. Look, I listed it here. Mark Kern, as described by multiple testimonies, would be out of work for a few weeks at a time. He would compensate with this by having meetings, which basically no one attended since he just babbled about himself and his personal interests. By the way, and this is me speaking, Kern admitted this himself, but stated it was because they were working on another version of the game and they made him stay home. So essentially his argument here is that everybody who was involved in the making of the game development, or at least had the most to say, which by the way, he was a co-founder. So at this point, it literally could only be the publisher who's telling him this. They wanted him to literally stay home. They wanted this guy out of the way. They didn't even want him there. He made it a victim thing, like, they didn't even want me there, like, they made me go home, how can I make a good game? And yes, we could believe that story. Or we could believe the story that if everybody is saying this, then maybe not everybody is true, or lying. So, like, what I mean is this. If I walk into 20 different buildings and I encounter 100 different people, and 90 people tell me I smell... Is it like a good argument for me to say, I don't smell, man? That's just their opinion. If 90 people are saying I smell in 20 different buildings. So it's not the different buildings. It's not the building variable. It's not the other people. The main variable is me being the stinky person. Which, by the way, I don't stink. Okay, so get that out there. Anyway, just to make my analogy. When you're the one that smells, maybe you need to start looking around and thinking, maybe I'm the one that stepped in shit. Right? But I notice he doesn't do that, and I think it's like one of my personal pet peeves, is like, he literally won't even admit that he has any fault. He won't admit his own fault. How can anybody respect you as a man or a developer if you can't come out and just say what happened and how you fucked up? And instead, you made it about,
they sent me home and they fired me and they pushed me out of my own company, and we could believe your rhetoric coming from your testimony, from your perspective, or we could believe the company, the Glassdoor reviews, and basically everybody else. You see what I'm saying? And like this started as a rant just about Reddit, but this became a rant about my problem with things about Reddit and also misinformation. Is this shit happens all the fucking time. Like, I'm seeing Mark Kern paraded around as like some hero. It's like, first off, he's not even like the 20th most important person on the project, dude. Did you guys forget about Rob Pardo and Mike Morhaime and fucking Ion Hasakostas and the 3 other dudes that I'm forgetting their names? Omar Gonzalez, what's the other dude that just left? Chris Metzen, and who else am I missing? I'm missing at least one other big name. You think that those guys didn't have more to do with the creation of the game? I think that. You know why I think that? Because when you listen to them give talks, they know the inner workings of the game. Like, when you see Rob Pardo give a talk about WoW, you know he made the game. You know he did. But Mark Kern, I've never really seen that from him. It just seems like he's just like saying like stories. And it's like, but you weren't a developer. So now you're saying a story of how you created this shit, and I just have to take your word for it. But I'm having trouble taking your word when you've made so many erroneous claims already that other people are calling you out on. I'm not calling you out on, they're calling you out on them. And so, like, anyway, that's my long fucking winded rant of like, fucking hate Reddit and Twitter and places like that where common sense becomes this thing just because it sounds like it makes sense. It seems logical. He was a prior developer. He was involved in the game. He did make a petition that helped people create Classic WoW. All of that is true. And I'm not going to say that he hurts children, or I'm not going to make some claim like that. But the claim that I made in my argument, as described in my Death of a Game video, is I think he's a megalomaniac. And I think he is a big reason why that company failed. Red 5 failed, and why the Firefall failed. One thing I didn't even mention, by the way, is throughout all of this time, there's actually evidence of this guy filing multiple trademarks. Look at this. You can literally look this shit up online. It's public record. Look at this. They have pages of trademarks. Firefall, The Continuum, The Juke, Rise of the Indies, Stage 5, Project Cosplay, The Continuum, Firefall Affinity. A couple different variations, so some of these are a little bit... Vertical Slice, Game Changers, Dinner with the Devs, Single Player Hater, a goods and service called Game Changer here. You know, what else do we got here? Whatever the fuck else is under the sun. Red-Handed, Stage 5, Firefall, Red 5 Studios, 16 billion different names of Red 5 or Firefall, essentially. Which these ones don't matter as much. But the point is he has a lot of these other ones, which is like, what's the point in this? You click on it, and it tells you. Downloadable webcast featuring visual and audio performances. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, but for what? Why? How does this help Firefall? A downloadable television program called Stage 5. Like, why does any of this shit fucking matter? When your game wasn't even done yet. I just don't get it, man. And that's like, I get offended because like I take development very seriously. Like, I take video games very seriously, and I take lessons seriously. That's why I created my channel. It's like, I want to know why certain games or companies failed. And I just hate, like, very, very rarely do you see a developer do what Mark Kern has done with this. You very rarely see that. Brad McQuaid has come out and said sorry for Vanguard. Said sorry for EverQuest making you able to read a fucking book during the downtime. He's apologized for his mistakes. He's admitted where he had cool ideas, where he's had bad ideas. Raph Koster, same exact thing, has a blog dedicated to admitting his own faults, right? That's what true creators who care about the medium and the games that they're making and the people who play them and the people who work with them, right? Have some respect for your own people that fucking work with you too. Like, that, to me, that's just like, it's an integrity thing. And maybe integrity is just one of my triggers. It looks like he was treating it as a big success before it was even released.
It's true. It's true. I checked the funding. Red 5 got invested in 2 times. 18.5 million funding from 2 venture capital firms in 2006. Then 23 million from the 9 in 2014. Okay. Wow. That's a lot of money. You're talking near $50 million being spent. And how much of it was spent on the game? Can anybody tell me that? Because I bet you Mark will tell you a lot of it was spent on the game. Like 90%. Sorry, dude. I don't believe you. Because why should I? You've been wrong about so many other things. Like, I'm proving you wrong myself with the evidence that you yourself are admitting on Twitter and in posts. That's the hilarious thing about people like Mark Kern is like, I don't need to make the argument for him. Look, he makes it for me. He makes my arguments for me. Thanks, dude. Thanks for making my arguments for me. Thanks for showing everybody that you basically didn't really give a fuck about the people that were involved in making the game. All you cared about is that people blamed it on you. That's why you always came out every chance you fucking could to tell people, it wasn't my fault, it wasn't my fault, it wasn't my fault. Well, I'm here to tell you, it was your fault. Just like it was everybody else's fault, dude. Take some fucking fault for some shit and stop claiming to do shit and that shit. Stop claiming shit that you didn't do, alright? That's all I'm saying. I know I rant a lot and I'm sorry, guys, but I don't like to get on my soapbox that much, but there's something that's just off with me about that guy, man. Like, I don't like the guy, man. I can't hide that. If I saw him in person and he tried to talk to me, I wouldn't want to say anything to him. I would tell him, I don't have anything to say to you. Now, if he wanted to have a discussion about any of this stuff, I would love to have a chat with him. But, I mean, come on. We know he won't. Hey, Daedalus Men, thanks for the Twitch Prime subscription. Welcome to the Nor Club. There's a tip and a fedora. And by the way, let's get into some roundtable discussion since we're a little bit off track here. Hey, what's up, guys? Let me change my sound really quickly. Sorry, can't hear you guys. Okay. Testing?
Hello?
Okay, cool. All right. How's everyone doing this week?
All's good.
Good.
After those videos, not so much.
Watching me like sweat my ass off, like yelling about shit. Like,
oh, that's fine. It's just those videos you showed, they nearly killed me.
they're really like, I actually watched the whole way through. Whenever I first was doing my video, I watched them all the ones I could find all the way through, just because I wanted to like get my headspace in like the headspace of somebody who's like, imagine you're working for Mark Kern during that time and you're looking at this video, your boss is making this video, you're like, like what do you even say? Like, how do you even defend your boss? You know, you're like,
I would, and I would go straight up his face and tell him what the fuck he's doing.
Right? You're like, maybe make Firefall instead. Yeah. You see how much of a problem that would be to say anything about it.
I mean, I'm Dutch. We just tell you to your fucking face.
Maybe they were glad that he wasn't fiddling in their work.
True, and that's what it kind of seemed like. It's sad to say, but it's like when they're sending you home because you're literally disrupting workflow. I mean, dude, that's why I don't get why people would ever defend the guy. It's like, it's not me saying that. It's the people he was working with were saying that. I'm not making that argument. They made that argument then when they kicked him out. So it's like, don't believe me, believe them. Anyway, so this week's MMO Roundtable topic is on everyone's favorite terminology. I say that sarcastically because terminology is something in MMOs and just frankly speaking video games that doesn't really get explained a whole lot. And since terminology and language really is always evolving, sometimes it's hard to know if the certain, term that you see in a video game context means the same as it always meant, rather. Should the term MMORPG be expanded on is the question today. And what new term or new terms, plural, should be erected? It looks like Card is going to go first, so I'll go ahead and pass it over to him. Also, just to add a little bit of backstory, if people need a little bit more to go with it. the idea is that MMORPG originally has a different definition than it had a couple of years later compared to what it has, much later as of right now. So the definition has changed in some ways if you just take into consideration the games that fall under the genre itself. So anyway, that's just my long-winded way of saying that's why I'm bringing up the question.
Well, then let me give a very short opinion on the matter. To me, it's a case of just taking MMO out of any other naming convention. Just like take the MMO for what it is. MMO. Okay, what is an MMO? If you're going to ask me, an MMO is a massive multiplayer online game, which means it requires a lot of people, but it should also require a persistent world in which those people, play their game. Think like a World of Warcraft or EVE Online, things like that. To me, like a game of, say, World of Tanks would not qualify as an MMO. It's a lobby-based game. There is no persistent open world effort in there. It's just like you log in, you play your tank, you get in a match, you fight the match, and you leave the match and you do it again. We've been doing that, playing Quake. There's really not much of a difference. So to call something like that an MMO, I don't think is valid. Call a game with a persistent open world, with a lot of players running around in it. I'm not even going to name numbers because I don't think it's all that relevant. It depends on your setting. Yeah, that would be an MMO to me. Once you define that, like if you have a MMO that's focused on an RPG, put an RPG tag on there. You have an action MMO, put an action tag on there. If you have a strategy MMO, put an RTS tag on it. I don't care, but separate those tags because they're designed to mean different things these days. Like an RPG is an RPG. So I can make an RPG, I can make a multiplayer RPG, or I can make an MMORPG. 3 different things.
My turn?
Yep. Limpos?
Okay. So I'm gonna give credit to Lubens, even though I am going to steal his term, because he did come up with a really good one, which was perpetual online world. But I'm going to add a little bit extra to that, and that's player interactive or player affected perpetual world. So PPOV or PEPOV, because that does describe quite a lot about what the game actually does. It's player affected or it's player interactable. That's describing more than what a lot of lobby games do. Persistent is, of course, that, well, even if you log out, it's still going to change. And an online world is, well, that's just to describe it's a world that's online. Now, it is missing the term massive, but I couldn't exactly fit it in anywhere where the acronym of it wouldn't sound completely stupid. So throw it on somewhere, wherever you like. Now, I would also like to talk about one other thing when it comes to terminology, and that's actually RPG. Because RPG, meaning role-playing game, there's a lot of MMOs that don't, in my sort of opinion, don't actually fulfill even the most basic of standards of role-playing, which is that either through action or interaction, your character either changes or the world changes its perception of your character, or the world changes. Now, a lot of MMOs don't actually fulfill that. Instead, what I would like to see is, frankly, just a term that is CPG, a class-playing game, because that actually explains way better than just RPG, because RPG can mean a lot of things now, whereas if you include the term CPG, where it's just describing, well, you're playing a character in a game and you have skills that you can level up. That's a class you're playing. It's not a role. And that's it. Next.
Okay. So I'll go next, and I mean, I feel like at this point, I don't know how I answer no, Like, I think there's just too much. There's too much conversation around the terms themselves, which when there's a lot of dialogue around like terminology, it means that terminology isn't clear. Like, it's not clearly explained. Otherwise, not everybody would be debating what does it mean. It's kind of like mixed martial arts. MMA stands for mixed martial arts. Nobody really debates what that means, right? Because it kind of goes without saying. But MMORPG, we could have 100 of us give our different definitions of the word or different games that we would believe fall under the category, and we would all give different like we would give like a lot of different games. I'm not gonna say like all of us would, but like a percentage of us at least would split hairs and maybe consider a certain kind of game an MMO. Maybe some of us wouldn't, or whatever else. So it clearly needs to be expanded. And in terms of like what new terms should be erected, I've thought about that a lot, and I'm not 100% sure on what my official answer is. When I say official answer, if you don't know already, I'm creating a series that's going to explain terminology. So I have to be careful with like, once I get it on wax, as they say, or do a video about it, it needs to be as accurate as I can possibly get it. So right now it's really, you know, for me about exploring as many terms as possible and what the terms mean, so I can make sure to handle the discussion when I get there later on, because I'm not ready for that discussion yet. Maybe that's what this will help for, and also talking to some old school developers who were there whenever the name was coined. But let's just first talk about when the name was coined. MMORPG, of course, most people know this already, was coined primarily by Richard Garriott, but I would say that primarily Ralph Koster was the leading force behind it, even though Garriott is the one that kind of came up with the terminology. The original idea of what was considered to be a massive multiplayer online RPG was just simply a persistent world, a world that was massive, which for the time was only 256 players, and then it was like player interaction as a central focus, which just kind of goes hand in hand with MMOs evolved from MUDs, MUDs evolved from tabletop. Player interaction is what keeps the games going, and so it also was a central theme early on. Obviously, the one that most people are going to pick at here is going to be the massive part, because that's the most subjective. Massive in the original context has to be defined, and that's why I want to make a video about it eventually, because I don't think most people actually know that the original idea of what was massive, not really massive. I mean, 256 players back then was massive for a MUD, and that's why that was considered to be massive. But, you know, within years after MMOs came out, they already shattered that record. So it wasn't like that was the litmus test early on for MMOs. It was more the litmus test for MUDs. MMOs were already breaking hundreds of players. You know, they were already having 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 players on the same server. They were able to do that already. So the word massive has shifted a lot since then. So either we need to redefine what massive means, and clearly it doesn't mean 256 players, because technology has massively, you know, no pun intended, evolved since then. But another part that people like to pick at, and I feel like, for example, this is one that Card and Limpos both like to pick at a lot, is the persistent world part, because that's a part where you can kind of draw the ire of like Destiny fans and, you know, lobby-based shooters and maybe like League and fans of those games, because they're like, well, we have persistence in our game. How is it not an MMO? We have massive players. There's lots of players playing, so, and we interact with each other. So how is our game not an MMO? And it's because, well, your world's not persistent. You're just in a lobby, and you load up the next game, and you load into the lobby. There's no actual persistency. You're not, like, attached to your world, if that makes sense. Now, in terms of actual terminology, so I don't rant about this forever, because honestly, this is a topic that we literally could talk about for hours, because it's one that I don't think has been talked about enough in the right context. And I mean, like, people who are actually willing to dive into what the different definitions mean, what are the problems of different definitions, and things of that nature. So, MMORPG, as a term, if it's going to remain, my point is that massive needs to be defined. What is massive? And the RPG part needs to actually be taken serious. Like, I think Limpos said that. Because otherwise, like Card said, just call it whatever it is. Call it a MMO, I don't know, RTS, if that's what it is. Don't call it an RPG if it's not an RPG, because it actually does your game a disservice. For people in chat who are wondering why terminology matters so much, like from an outsider's perspective, think about it in this way. Each time a new MMO comes out, and it's called an MMORPG despite not actually falling under the definition of what is considered an MMORPG, the meaning becomes less and less, you know, meaningful. It doesn't matter as much, because clearly they're not really following what the actual meaning is, and next thing you know, it gets diluted, and we forget what the original idea was. So you can imagine why somebody like me, who's essentially kind of a historian at this point, is so like obsessed with trying to maintain the terminology, because otherwise, if it doesn't matter, and this sounds like really simplistic, but let me explain. If the term doesn't matter, then none of it matters. And what I mean by that is that if MMORPG doesn't matter, then what it stands for doesn't really matter that much either. Because otherwise, you just call it something else, you know? You don't play a shooter and call it a RTS game when it's not. Even if it has RTS elements, you don't call it an RTS game because it has RTS elements. You call it a shooter. You just say that it has RTS elements. It's hard to be a massive multiplayer online game and have MMO elements unless we come up with another term. And the other terms that I have are MOG, which is a common one that sometimes people use, but very sparingly. I feel like it's only really used in like articles and shit like that, but it's not really used in conversation. MOG is just multiplayer online game. It could apply to anything. I mean, it could apply to an RTS. It could apply to a shooter or a third person game. It applies to whatever falls under the multiplayer online game branch. Lobby games, for example, fall under the title of MOG. Lobby games are MOGs, at least according to the definition. Then I have MMORPG, which is just multiplayer online RPG. So you just take away the G or not and add the RP to it. So now you have a MMORPG, and MMORPGs, examples of MMORPGs would be SWTOR, would be Final Fantasy XIV, would be Star Trek Online, Lord of the Rings. A couple of these games are more like multiplayer RPGs than they are massive multiplayer online games. The other term that I came up with, or not came up with, but wanted to bring up, is virtual world. And this one doesn't get mentioned a lot. And it's because it was, technically speaking, kind of the original terminology that was used. So it's even older than the MMORPG term. A virtual reality, obviously, and the idea of virtualness has existed for a long time. Sci-fi has existed for a long time. So virtual world is a concept that has existed long before MMORPG. However, virtual world is a concept that I think is not very sexy to say, and it also is kind of hard for people to conceptualize what it means. So I feel like when you use virtual world to describe a game, we saw 2 games today that used virtual whatever, virtual society and virtual, I can't remember, community, I think the other one was called. People are using virtual now. It's becoming more and more commonplace, but virtual world, I've always thought, like, should we use it as a word to describe something? For marketing purposes, probably not. But could we use it just, as nerds to help with classification? I think we could. And what a virtual world is essentially a world that, unlike with a massive multiplayer online RPG, a massive multiplayer online RPG can be a virtual world. But a virtual world isn't necessarily the same as an MMORPG. And what I mean by that is that a virtual world has to function in a very specific way, meaning it needs to be an actual world, designed as a world. It's not designed, this is going to sound strange, but it's not designed as a game, even though it is a game. It's designed as a world. A game is more like, for example, let me introduce a mechanic here so you can group with your teammates. That's a game element. You're like, you can gather this amount of thing for this amount of resource. That's a game element. A virtual world, it's harder to explain in game terms because it's not really about being a game. But it's like, just think about the Matrix. The Matrix is a virtual world, right? Let's think of many more. Whenever Star Trek does the whole, let's go into, what do they call it? The is it holodeck? Is that what they call their little
Yes, holodecks.
Right, when they go into the holodeck and it has like all of this, that's virtual. That's a virtual reality. That's a virtual world, and they can get pretty detailed with it, especially in Star Trek. Probably better than any other show. Like, you can actually create your own home world on it, and you see people like go to like certain places and hang out at the pond and shit in Star Trek because it's not really real, but kind of is. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, it's a world. It's designed as a world, and yet it's played as a game. So, long story short, virtual world it's more of like I feel like a nerd word, if that makes sense. It's like the posh word you use whenever you want to have a specific discussion about an MMO, but I don't really think it's ever going to be used in the mainstream. So, long story short, those are like my big ones. MOG, multiplayer online game, multiplayer online RPG, and of course MMORPG, with the massive part being expanded where expanded to, I mean, at least 5 times what it was before, at least, which brings us over 1,000 players concurrently on the same world. That's it. That's all I've got.
Okay, so I'm actually going to disagree with you here and probably with almost everyone else, but like my argument is a more pragmatic one, which is that while like the MMORPG term doesn't exactly fit like most of the, well, I'd say that there are like a bunch of games that don't really fit into the definition and are thrown together. Um like we have used the word, like the word was pretty like the definition was already pretty subjective already, because we can even agree like what massive really is. And a lot of games have been categorized as MMORPG, and I think almost everyone has more or less the same idea for what they are. And also, like through the years, there hasn't been enough evolution or variance for there to be like different branches or different like divergences of different genres. No, but of course, MMORPGs really have potential to like diverge into different paths, but since there hasn't been really that much of an evolution, I wouldn't say that we actually need like more specific terms.
Okay, so I guess Osa is finished.
Yeah, I'm finished.
Um, sorry. Uh, I will probably disagree with Lempos and nerdSlayer and Carde, and I will be more of a on Osa's side. Though a lot of it has already been said, and I cannot help but notice how obsessed everyone in gaming is with acronyms. And acronyms like MMO and MMORPG kind of went through this phase of abstraction where people aren't really talking about the meaning of the acronym, but they rather associate it with the games that are popular or that they themselves like, and
Mm.
then yeah, associate it with other games. This might be hard to explain, but I think everyone has heard something like Souls-like game, where journalists and different people will talk about a new single player game, and instead of giving it any real genre, though I think Souls like game has become a genre by now, they would just call it Souls like. And these games can be vastly different from each other, and they might just have like one element from Souls game, and that's why people call them Souls like. And sadly, I guess people don't really want to invest the brain power into thinking about all the acronyms and all the different meanings of it. I just don't see it very viable for people to bother themselves with, all the other different acronyms. They're just looking for something familiar or similar to maybe Final Fantasy 14 or WoW. And then you kind of have to go through this annoying phase of figuring out, okay, so what is it about? I would actually love to have a table of different acronyms and genres and just see what this game is about on the first glance. But ultimately, I feel that MMOs, even WoW, has changed over time so much that there is so much to be defined and pinpoint that it's just impossible. And we have to kind of go into this exploration and figuring out what this game is about, because there is such a big difference between WoW Vanilla and then the retail game these days. It's just impossible. Like for me, I would like to know on first glance if the game is going to be uh, sharded, or is going to be have layers, or if all the players will see only the players on the same server, or there is just so much that would have to go into consideration. And I actually really like the post by Gartner that he made in the MMO Roundtable Discord, where he pinpointed a lot of different acronyms that, in my opinion, fit the games a lot. But I feel like if I would see those acronyms, I would have to come back to them a lot and Google them a lot to figure out what they really mean. But instead of that, I would probably just read an article about the game or watch a video about the game.
I think that's
That's it for
because
me.
it's not supposed to all happen at one time. Like I see what you're saying. Like if right now we just said, okay, everyone start using these terms, it just wouldn't work. You're right. Like nobody would follow them. People be getting confused. This term. Like I'm just gonna call it MMORPG. Like I totally see it. But I guess I see it as more in the future. It's more of like a future argument of if you start to change the conversation today, you can affect the conversation obviously in the future the most. And so it's more of like, if I don't defend it, it's only going to get worse. So I've kind of realized I'm not a term guy. I'm not an acronym guy. Like, I've never been that kind of person who's like so obsessed with defending terminology. Or, I mean, really, like, I feel like my girlfriend's the person here to make this argument, honestly, because she's a lot more into language than I am. But like, at the same time, I understand that because of this, there's been so many problems that have arisen. And here's a good example. I just finished my voiceover and script for my Auto Assault video. Auto Assault was a car vehicle, combat-based game created by NetDevil, published by NCSoft, and it kind of is like Twisted Metal, the MMO. And as you could imagine with Twisted Metal, the MMO, is it really an MMO, like massive or persistent and all those other ways? Like, not really. It barely falls under the guise of being an MMO. And one of the things, and I won't spoil much, but one of the things that the developer says was a reason that the game didn't do well is because they thought that just having a feature list was kind of enough. Like, just having the features would kind of be enough. I know it sounds stupid, but like, that's what he said. That just having the features, like, oh, we can group together and we can talk together, so then therefore people would just do it. He kind of thought, that was like what he was saying, is like they thought that would just kind of work that way. But why doesn't it work that way? Because it's not actually what they're advertising it to be. You see what I'm saying? So it actually does matter what you call it, because if you call that game an MMORPG, it's going to fail. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's literally going to fail because you're not classifying it in the correct way. A perfect example of this is if we have a discussion about colors and we say red is a darker, or let's say dark red is a darker shade of color, but light red is a lighter shade of color. Well, obviously we both know that they're both red, right? But we know that one is darker and one is lighter. But if we just call the lighter one the darker red just because it is red, do you see what the problem would be? The problem would be we would lose the color. We would lose the spectrum, if that makes sense. The spectrum of colors. So it's like you don't, I guess what I'm trying to say is like when you lose like the spectrum of colors of, you have a word, you have what massive means, you have what massive multiplayer online means, that does something to your brain. You expect something from that. And so developers and publishers use it for marketing because it's a sexy word, at least it used to be. It's good to tell people, oh, it's massive, lots of people. It's good for marketing. It used to be, at least. I don't know if I can make that argument anymore, but it used to be. And so you call your game this MMORPG or MMO whatever, thinking it's actually going to do it a lot of good. But what I think it actually does is do it a lot of bad, because you're classifying a game in the wrong genre and you're dooming it to failure because it's not supposed to be what you think it's supposed to be. And my perfect example for this is SWTOR. SWTOR is not designed to be a massive multiplayer online game in the same context that a game like EverQuest is. You can't make that argument. It's literally like inconceivable to make that argument because just of the way the games structure themselves. One is about a server and being open-ended and having a massive map. The other one is going from instance to instance to instance to instance to instance to instance, but you're still technically traveling. So it's like, that's what makes it even more confusing, is the games that are calling themselves MMORPGs have aspects of MMORPGs, like you were saying, Plastic Waste. So people are calling them that because it's more convenient. But that's actually part of the problem. Is not only does it hurt the consumer because you don't know what to expect from whatever. Imagine if you saw a new FPS launched on Steam that had all these great reviews, and you were happy to go try it out and play it. But when you loaded up the game, it was an RTS. Would you be happy or mad? I would be mad because I'd be like, wait, this isn't an FPS. This isn't what I bought. This is not what I've expected, because I had a different expectation of what I was going into. So I guess that it's like I come from that kind of perspective of like I have to defend the original term or change the term. Otherwise, we have to be careful with calling games this term that essentially doesn't mean anything anymore, because it doesn't. Like if you look at what's being called an MMORPG today, there's too much in the way of like the definition is just all over the place, right? There's like 60 billion games that people will call an MMORPG. I mean, I've seen people call Destiny an MMORPG. I can't have a discussion about MMORPGs if people are calling Destiny an MMORPG. Does that make sense? I can't really have a discussion about it because people are going to make arguments using Destiny as an argument. It's not an argument. It's not an MMORPG, so it can't be used as an argument for that. It would be like, I don't know. It's like using a comedy when you're trying to talk about like a romance, you know? It's just like, yes, they can do both, but it's like, if I want to watch a comedy, I don't want to watch a romance. Like if I want to watch a romance, I don't really want to watch a comedy unless I'm trying to watch a rom-com, which I guess is a bad example because they're very prevalent genre for many reasons. But anyway, does anybody have anything to add?
I thought Lempos had something to say.
Well, you are not safe. You were safe, and Plastic Waste actually stole my follow-up, which was going to be just to somewhat take that point again. That yeah, new terms could be nice and what all, but just the association with something like MMORPG, like what that sort of means to people, like people sort of generally get what the idea is behind that term and what they're getting into. Which I especially talked with, I think it was Garfner and Ludens about, which was both something like ARPGs and roguelites. Like those two terms get thrown on a lot of different games where it's not entirely true always, not in its most precise definition, but the core principles are there. And they are so alike, the core principles, that people have a generally good idea what it means to be to buy into a game that says it is a roguelite, light, or an ARPG. And a bit like the same way with MMORPGs, it's like, yeah, okay, that might not be the RPG elements, and there might not be you might not be able to have 5,000 people in a zone, but the general idea of a big world that you can travel through, that you'll meet a lot of different other players in, that is what a lot of people probably think when they see the term MMORPG. And so that term is to some extent good enough. I'm essentially shooting my own argument in the foot.
I think it's a very complicated matter because I mean language itself is very complicated.
Right.
The meanings of words just change so much. I mean the older generation can never keep up with the lingo of the younger generation and so on. And I mean in the case of developer that practically shoot themselves in their foot, that's kind of their fault because that means they didn't know their audience really, first of all. But I do agree that the term MMORPG or even MMORPG is just used way too loosely. And but on the other thing, if we just go with things like multiplayer online, then that's so many things as well. It, to be honest, I don't have like a solution. I think that it depends on the communities to kind of agree on what they are going to use and just let it naturally evolve because I think it will change with time, definitely. Because if the companies want to be successful at marketing their games, they have to let go of the MMORPG term because I think it's not getting them anywhere. And uh, I don't really know many people that are looking for MMORPG games they are probably mostly looking for a game that's similar to the other game they are playing.
Yeah, I guess what to go into what somebody said earlier in chat. And by the way, that's a really good point. I think that's kind of the easiest way to put it. Is just that it's not easy. It's going to be a process. It's going to take time. And I agree with you that I actually think it'll benefit developers if they shed the MMO part of their game, or at least like saying it's an MMO if it's not, because people are going to have a much different expectation when they go into a game of what an MMO is. And what I find interesting about MMOs is that, unlike most genres, it's a genre that's not technically a genre. Now, what I mean by that is that technically, it doesn't mean only one style of game. Does that make sense? Because you can have a massive multiplayer online shooter, but you could also have an RTS or a racing game. Like I was just talking about Auto Assault. Like, there's so many styles of game, it becomes more complicated, because essentially you realize if that's the case, then the MMO part is the only part that matters, because the ending part is the part that applies to the game that you're playing. So it's like Card said, he put it pretty simply, but it's true. Like, if you just call it what it is, at least that's better than just calling it an MMORPG. If you're just calling it an MMO, whatever it is. But still, attaching the MMO part, I agree with Plastic in the sense that I think that it actually is harming games. It's not as... Rob Pardo, by the way, agreed with that point. He in an article stated that he thinks more so these days, developers are shying away from the term MMO. He thinks people are afraid of the term because of a lot of the negative connotation that goes with it, and kind of how the market right now isn't doing so hot. One thing that I wanted to get into that someone mentioned earlier, and actually, you know what? By the way, I'll maybe throw this in now, but I didn't want to leave you guys here with me too long, because I know it's been a bit. Are you guys cool with staying a little bit longer?
Sure.
Yeah, dude.
Okay. There was a point that I wanted to get into, because inevitably people are going to bring up, okay, so what's an MMO? What's a this? What's a that? What's, that's the conversation that usually happens after you say, well, that's not the definition. And so then you have to actually kind of bring up some examples. And that's where I agree with what Plastic said, and I think Limpos mentioned it as well, is it gets a little bit complicating, as you're like, well, this game's kind of like it, but then this one kind of not, but they're kind of similar, and then it's like in that game of inches, you start to run into problems. And that's why I think that the MMO term just needs to be evolved. It's because if you're having a constant battle of, yeah, but it's not persistent, yeah, but it's not persistent, okay, come up with a different genre. MOG, like, call it something else then. Or, oh, it's not enough players to be considered massive, but I guess it's a massive multiplayer online game because we're all connected, or we're all playing the game. It's like, no, if it's not massive, then it's not a massive multiplayer online game. So just call it a multiplayer online game. The problem that also comes into contact, I think, with that discussion is the final point of being an MMO. And Limpos and I have talked about this before. It's probably the hardest thing to explain to people about an MMO. And it's often the part that gets described as the virtual world part, but it's player interaction and community interaction. I feel like...
I would definitely say that it's very hard to describe in few words.
Okay,
like,
fair enough.
If you have 100 words or 200 words, then it gets far easier to sort of explain. Okay, well, you have a big map, it has a bunch of zones, you run between these zones. Other people will also do this, they'll do these quests, blah, blah, blah. Right? Just fill that out. But saying it in very few words, that's very hard. That's where we came up with sort of the best definition we could, which is that it's player and constantly capable, interactive, persistent world multiplayer game. And like, that's sort of the best we could really come up with. But when you then sort of look at that word, if you're not that familiar with games, that doesn't mean much. That might as well be a multiplayer game, really. If you don't have enough innate knowledge about video games and you look at that term, it's like, the difference between an MMO and just a standard multiplayer game is not gonna be that big.
That's the problem with theme park and sandbox. Is I actually hate even fucking saying those terms. I'll just be honest. Like, I don't like them, and I don't like them because essentially, games were originally designed being sandbox because of primarily resources being limited, and because that was the kind of world they were trying to create, right? It was a world they were trying to create. That's what MMO was meaning at the time. It was like they were trying to create some kind of world, whatever that meant to them. They didn't want it to be as much about a contained experience where you go from point to point to point to point to point along a linear path. That wasn't the idea originally. But of course, as we know, eventually that started to become a thing, and that thus, theme park became invented. But that just made shit so complicated because, like, someone mentioned this in chat. I think it might have been Doom Black Dragon mentioned this in chat, and it's true that where it gets complicating is when you start to talk about sandbox and theme park and them both being considered MMOs. It's like, technically speaking, a theme park is kind of opposed with the term MMO, depending on the game. It really does depend on the game. There's some edge cases, like WoW. I think that would qualify as an MMO. I mean, come on.
Well,
But
the big problem is instancing when it comes to theme parks, because that's almost always there when it's a theme
it's
park.
true.
And suddenly you're actually dragging people out of the MMO into the just standard lobby game.
Right. And I think that really makes it even more complicating because now theme park doesn't just mean linear, it means instanced. It didn't used to mean instanced. WoW is not super instanced, at least not originally, but it becomes instanced, of course, after they've changed the way the game works. But
well, if I can just do a quick sidetrack on
Sure.
World of Warcraft in that regard, because it's something that I noticed while playing the private server. Now, I don't know if they've tinkered with the game at all to sort of make it more capable of having more players or whatever. But one thing that I did notice is, one, it's of course split between the two continents. So already you have half and half. But then I also started to notice that whenever I was going to a new zone, I never noticed anybody else in the other zone until I passed the threshold. And suddenly people would start being in the zone. And then I actually started really noticing and started following people into the zone. It's like, oh, what do you know? They actually disappear. Now, I don't know if that's something they've somehow magically been capable of making instancing with from zone to zone, or if that was actually in classical WoW. But it sort of made me realize even WoW is actually instanced from zone to zone, making it, well, frankly, not an MMO at that point, because it is just these mini lobbies, or not mini lobbies, but quite large lobbies that are sort of centered around a zone. It's why every zone is bottlenecks that so you can't look into the other zone and notice why is no one over there. And then when you run in, it's like suddenly everyone appears. And I mean, that sort of also becomes a problem because in your terminology of MMO, well, is it okay that we have these sort of quick instancing between zones? Like, if it is just a smooth transition and those people are actually there, but you can't see them regardless because of the bottleneck, only if you really notice it, is it then still an MMO, even though there is this instancing between one and the other?
Well, it is because, like we talked about before, just because they introduce a system that takes away from a core system doesn't automatically mean it's no longer whatever the core system was set on. But what it does mean is that now that's being slowly eroded. So I do think it's possible to un-MMO your own game. I do think that's possible. But do I think it's possible, or do I think it's like probable? Like most of the time, probably not. Most companies they're not going to be able to actually like un-MMO their game. Like it's more likely that they're going to introduce aspects that maybe decrease the amount of resources that need to be used, so then therefore they save money, which they don't care if it affects MMO because they don't care about the MMO part, they just care about the money. And that's why sharding and things like that exist, frankly speaking. People who say sharding exists for leveling, I mean, when was it created, guys? Come on. Like it was created much after most people leveled already. What a silly argument.
Well, wasn't that always the point of sharding? That it was for people who wanted to level, but they sort of realized people were so far ahead at that point that a lot of the actual players of the game, or they didn't get enough new players for the leveling experience to really have many other people around to play with. I mean,
I don't
the
know if
game
that's
had
the case. I
if the
mean,
g-
I have never heard that argument.
I don't know either, but if the game had continued in the same path, like in design, where it was super super hard and nobody was leveling anymore, and not that many new people would come to the game, that was gonna be real freaking problematic because suddenly you're in this lone world with it's like maybe once in a while you see somebody else, or you'll
I mean,
see a level 190 character running past you, not giving a darn what you're doing.
in classic WoW, there were people leveling all the time. I don't think it was then that much of a problem.
Well, it also took a long time.
Yeah, it took
It
a
was
long
also
time, but people
game.
were always leveling. There were always people in the sense.
Yeah.
But I think it became worse and worse, especially later on, because like if you add more areas and those areas only for the higher levels, it's going to empty out because
Yeah.
you're gonna keep the same sort of server population, but you're gonna spread them out over more and more different terrain, and in the end, it's gonna create a lot of dead zones. And that's even the case today. Even with sharding, there's just like I can go into many. Like I think I would not be overestimating it if I say that in current WoW, so BFA, I think if you go into half of the zones in the game, there's nobody there. Sharding or not, there's literally nobody there. You're the only person.
That goes back with what I was saying earlier. If you think about it, like I don't know if you heard that point about not just earlier, but much earlier about having content not be designed as a race. Because if you design it as a race, why are you surprised when people race? You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like people who complain when people grief in a game like WoW or games like that. Like when they would complain about griefing, it's like, but if the developers doesn't change the mechanic, then is it really the fault of the player if they just keep taking advantage of the, so it like it reminds me of that kind of thing.
I mean, look at how the griefing with Vortex has pretty much been completely changed to mostly eliminated in EVE Online now, because they changed the mechanic.
If I can note on the leveling experience, I think it's also just to do with age of the game. Like the further and further you get in, like the more and more expansions you get in, and the more and more ability people have, or time people have had to level up all the old characters that they need or want, etc. It's like there does come a point where it's like, well, I have one of every single one. It's like at that point, it's really only some really enthusiastic people who are going to continue leveling in all the small zones. And
I think that's a design issue.
that
there.
is something you can address.
I actually had a point that I wanted to bring up about that. I don't want you guys to talk that much about it because I might use it as our next question.
I was thinking to say that could actually be a topic, how to change that.
The reason why is that, and I'll just put this out there. The reason why I think it should be left as a potential question for next time. You know what? Actually, just finish making your point. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
I'm fine with going it on the next time because I would have quite the bit to say on that one.
Also, there's something I wanted to add about like our original debate, which is that I am like at the end of the day, I don't think that the labels or the terms that we use to talk about it matter that much. I think what really matters is how people perceive the word, right? So like if you talk to someone who doesn't care that much about MMORPGs, who is not someone like us who
Hey, Evil Eyes,
really cares
man.
about those
Good to see
games and
you.
has played
Thank you for the bit
ones,
donation. I
if you
appreciate
ask
it, man.
him, like,
For
when
people
I
who don't
say
know
MMORPG,
Evil Eyes,
what
by
do
the
you
way,
think? He's probably going to say
let me wait
something
until
like
Osai stops talking so I don't talk
World of
over him.
Warcraft or RuneScape.
He doesn't hear
And
me,
the
don't worry,
thing
I'm
is
muted.
that many of the games that are labeled as MMORPG, they all look really similarly. They all have very similar features, and there's very few things that set them apart from each other.
I mean, that's just traditional in game history. I mean, the first person shooter, they're all Doom clans. because they all look sort of the same sort of thing. And it takes quite a long time for those things to diversify themselves, and even
I
longer
would
for a lot
also
of people to realize it.
Sorry, Kat. I would also say that even though, yes, some of them do look quite the same and some of them do feel the same, even minute changes to a game can actually make some pretty large differences.
I agree with
And
that.
And
That's why I
especially
hate
when
when people bring up that Final Fantasy argument with WoW. They're like, Final Fantasy is so much better than WoW, guys. It's like, guys, you know we still have to have the discussion about gameplay, right? Like, we still have to have the discussion. I know you might not like WoW, but it's got some buttery smooth gameplay. Don't discount that. It's not just because everything else is the same. Don't forget about that part. That's still different.
But as I was saying, the difference between sort of a, let's call it a pseudo MMO and then a true MMO, even the small differences between those two can actually be quite impactful on how people feel about the game and whatnot. And I'll point to something like Battlefield and Call of Duty. Now, both of them are shooters, and both of them have followed quite the same trend quite a lot. But the games, if you play them, are vastly different to the point where you really do need the definition that, yes, this is COD, this is Battlefield. Yes, they're both shooters, but they're very, very different.
Oh, definitely.
And that's sort of the same point with MMOs. Like, yeah, there might be games that call themselves MMOs, but sort of they do so many shortcuts that it's sort of not an MMO anymore. It's more of a lobby game, and sometimes you run in a zone where other people are, but the rest of the game is frankly just a lobby game. Whereas a true MMO, where everything is open and there's basically no instancing, those two games are going to be quite a bit different.
I may have missed a little bit on that, on the instancing. I did hear some bits and pieces, but I would say instancing is frankly unavoidable. Like, you're going to need to put different areas on different nodes and stuff like that, because your server tech is otherwise it's just not going to handle it smoothly.
Yeah.
I would say. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No,
No.
ahead.
You go ahead. You go ahead.
You have talked. Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, but Card, you are right. Like, you do need to make shortcuts. You can't run everything on the same server, otherwise it's just gonna crash in a single second.
And
the second it starts up and everybody logs in.
But there's a far more important aspect to that. Outside of, is it needed technically, whatever, is it needed from the gameplay perspective? No. All I need for the MMO is to have the people instance it in my same instance that are within my interactive sphere. So if somebody is on the other side of the world, he's not within my interactive sphere. Whatever I'm doing is not going to affect him, and vice versa. So,
but what if it is?
That's a nuanced argument, but I see what Card's saying. Like, he's saying, like, it's kind of like if the tree falls in the woods, does it really fall? Almost like that in a way, like, but with servers.
No, it doesn't make a sound.
Yeah, it's like the other guy on the server. He is on my server or isn't if he's on some other kind of shard version of my server. But as long as I don't really know that he's in a different instance, I'm still going to think we're on the same world. So it's like you can suspend your disbelief with instances pretty easily. I mean, especially because you load into somebody's house. It's not out of the question to be like, this is weird. Like, it's believable in some ways. So I kind of agree. I don't think instancing is just like, oh, it's just, completely get rid of it. It's horrible. It's like, obviously it has uses. And I think Card brings up a good point that maybe we need to say for another fucking question, but a question of, if your game was instanced, but it was instanced in a way that you could barely tell, would you mind? And I bet you most people would say no. So developers, there you go. Just find a way to do it in a way less obvious way.
EVE Online, anybody? It's like, EVE Online puts it in your fucking face. It just tells you, like, every single system is on its own instance. Hell, there are different... how do you call them again? Oh, fucking hell, you got different areas within each system, like that you're on the grids, which are like, if you're not on the same grid, like, I can scan you, I can see you're in the system, but I'm not seeing your ship because it's not relevant for me to see your ship. So I don't need the data. So the data that you require this depends on like the distance. Like, yeah, if I'm going to blow up a castle here, which ruins your trade route while you're on the other side of the world and coming this way, it is going to affect you. Do you need to see me blowing up that castle at that moment? No, because you're on the other side of the world.
It doesn't take away from my experience to know that I can't
Exactly.
see you right now. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I still know that you're doing it. You're having your experience, and I'm having mine. So it doesn't take away at all. So like, I can totally see, like, people who just say instancing is completely like fugazi, like completely get rid of it. I think you're being a little bit exaggerative. Like, it's kind of like, oh, sharding is evil, so just get rid of like any kind of layering concepts or any idea of like moving server loads around. It's like, no, we want that. We just don't want it the way they're doing it. Like, there's other ways we could figure out to do it.
I mean, take a very simple real life example in this one. Like, I need to buy a new mobile phone in reality. Like, but whatever some country decides to be angry at some other country, they're going to do a trade embargo, which means that the phone I wanted to buy 2 weeks ago is now 200 euros more expensive. I did not see that happening. I was not there in person. I did not see the people that negotiated it. I didn't see the people that got very angry about it, but it still happened. That's on a different instance, so to speak. Yeah, sorry, Plastic, go ahead.
I would actually say that instancing is the most important thing, because instancing can be done in many different ways, because just sharding is already different from instancing, and instancing different zone is very different from instancing that is done when it comes to lobby games, because WoW and other lobby games are actually instanced. It's just a matter of how the instancing is done, and if the instancing affects the social interactivity a lot. And that is actually what I wanted to come back. I don't know what was the definition that Lempos was talking about. It was so long and so complicated, I already forgot it. But I'm sorry. I think that it's quite curious. I don't see much talk about society centric or community centric MMOs or games in general. It's almost as if developers forgot to talk about it, just how important society is when it comes to multiplayer games, and what role is it playing in their game.
I think you cut out, or was that? Were you finished?
Uh, I think I'm finished. Hopefully, I didn't cut off. We can probably just wrap it up now.
That's funny though, because it's just it seems true sometimes when you're just like, well, did anybody even think about making this game social? Because like, how am I supposed to be social if no one needs to be social with me? And
I would like to note they added friend lists, and they added like like items that you can give to other players.
I know, but that's what people say. They make that argument all the time.
Yeah,
like, that's a real
by
argument.
that definition, even League of Legends is social, right? It's a MMO then. Just because I can have friends and I can give them skins as gifts.
I mean, I would call it social, but it's mostly just people screaming at me. But you know, that's social, right?
All right,
Yeah,
so
but
I
is it
will.
important for the game?
Sorry.
Sorry, no, it's
No, go ahead. It's just gonna happen. You guys are on a different part of the world than I am, so I'm a little bit ahead of you guys. My ping's 20, so I'm pretty good ping here.
so I guess the question isn't really if there is social interaction. The question is it community centric, or is the community important? Is the society important? Because if you have a game, I would like to have a game where if you're not a part of society or community, it's unplayable. I would love that. I know it's a little bit scary for some people, and League of Legends isn't that game. I don't have to even have friends to play it and be good at it.
I actually, I would agree with that, but of course, I'm the extremity, here. So,
I mean, I think I've made this point a dozen times at this point, and that is MMOs are sort of just by resource or lack of resource and lack of time and whatnot. They simply are just inferior games in almost all aspects. That's just how that's going to be, because they need to build so much. But the one thing that they have that almost no other games have is community. Is the sort of illusion of society, illusion of all of these things. And when that's the big thing that you have that sets you apart from everything else, that's also what you then need to focus on and need to sort of drive forth, because everything else is really just not something you can compete with other games in. I mean, like, just to take a good example, like we've talked about physics based games, like, and I've been playing Mordhau as of late. It's like, I mean, even if an MMO tried, it's not gonna beat that game. That game is so focused on that one thing, and meanwhile an MMO has to do 100 things as well besides just the combat. It's like, so well, I mean, still do make good combat, of course. Don't ignore all the other aspects, but one of the very key pillars that your game is surrounded around is community and people talking to each other.
I agree with you completely. So much.
I think that's why like the term player interactivity means like so much to me. Is like, I can describe it to somebody, but it's kind of hard to describe it if you just look at like a current generation game. It's hard to make an argument when you look at that kind of game. You have to take it and then compare it to another game that's different. When you take them side by side and compare them, in my opinion, that's the easiest way to see how so different they are. Is a great example is this. So the first time I ever played Star Wars Galaxies NGE, and NGE was the theme parked version of Star Wars. So this had a storyline, 1 to 50, questing. I knew where I was going. I knew where I was being dropped off, right? The original game wasn't like that. You kind of were dropped off in the middle of nowhere, and then they told you to figure it out. Now, clearly, that's also not the answer. So we have two extremes. We know that just giving me a laundry list of things to do, the second I log in and then never letting me explore the beautiful world you've crafted for me, maybe not the best idea. Just in the same way that maybe it's not the best idea to have no hand-holding, because then you're essentially, you can't control the quality of people who are playing your game. But I want to make the point that, well, first off, we need to end this discussion. It's been nice having you guys here, and I've appreciated it. But the last thing I'll say about the player interactivity, so you take those two games, you compare them together. And let's use Final Fantasy XIV, and let's just use my favorite MMO. Let's use Star Wars Galaxies. So these two games, and you compare them together. In Final Fantasy XIV, so far, I've been playing the game. I don't know how many hours, I couldn't tell you, but I'm level 39, almost 40. So however many hours that is. I have talked to 2 other players, not counting my friends from stream. And the only reason I talked to them was because I said thank you, basically. so I was just like, hey, thanks for helping me. That's what I said. Thank you. Because I think one of the guys like fell off of some building or something and like died, and some guy ran right up and rezzed me. It was nice. So I was like, hey, thanks. Well, it didn't really work that way, because technically, and I'll show you the video because I recorded it, I got stuck in the world and I was froze, and then I died and I couldn't move, and then I had to relog, but technically still the same story anyway. In that scenario, right? That guy who came to help me, he really did that for no reason other than just to help me. Like, it was selfless, right? Because he doesn't get anything from that. But here's where I'm going to sound a little bit weird. You actually should get something from helping people. You should. Social interactions, and I'm not going to make them get too technical here, but social interactions do have some sort of like unofficial agreement, right? We kind of you are going to give me something, I'm going to give you something. So like, I'll just use Card as an example. Card is a friend of mine who's been a member of the Discord for a long time and has helped me with moderation. And it's like, he's useful to me in these ways, and I'm useful to him in these ways. I don't take offense to that, you know, because I know, like, he doesn't just like me out of the kindness of his heart. I'm sure there's other things that maybe I stimulate some idea, or maybe he likes some other quality about me. The point being is that social interactions are never just done for no reason at all. And that's the problem in a lot of those games, is like, if you are social, you're literally just being social for no reason. Why are you being social? You see what I'm saying? So it's like, if I want to group with people and I don't need to group with them in SWOTOR, why am I even being social? It's almost like people could look at me like I'm the weird one when I'm being social. And that's happened to me in these MMOs, like, or quote unquote MMOs. I get treated like the weird one when I'm trying to be social. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm just playing the game. I thought I am. I thought I'm just playing the game. I'm just trying to be social. But if you think about now, back in the example that I brought up with Galaxies, how this example applies. In that game, how did I create my friendships with players? How did I have these guys on my friendship? By the way, I knew people in that game that I went back years later and they were still playing, and we still could talk to each other. So like that's how much we created some sort of friendship over helping each other. And by the way, how did I meet these friends? I'll tell you. There's 3 that come to mind. One, I met through role-playing. He taught me how to role-play. For no reason. He wanted to teach me how to roleplay because I was joining his guild, which was a roleplay guild. So it's like, boom, that's the one memory I remember of that guy. There's another guy who gave me my first speeder and helped me do my finish my legacy quest, which was level 50 in Galaxies and New Gaming Experience. I remember that guy. And that guy was a long-standing friend of mine. I met another crafter. His name was Darkbow. I still remember his name. And why do I remember that guy? Because he crafted things for me. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like you create these personal relationships because you should have the idea that I'm giving them value and they're giving me value. But if you ever have to think about a social situation where it only seems like there's no gain for either of you in a given scenario, that's a poor social situation. You see what I'm saying? It's like, that's the fault of the video game itself and the developers. Just like Limpos joked about it, but seriously, like, let's talk about it. Throwing a fucking friends list in my game doesn't make it social. Throwing a friends list in my game and then also making me incentivized to work with my friends on my friends list. Well, okay, well, now we're actually getting somewhere, right? Not just having a feature doesn't make it. And it sounds funny, but you guys will see in my auto assault video. Non-ironically, the developers thought by just having features it would work. They just thought that. Like, there were still people back then making MMOs who thought that way. We've come a long way since then. But anyway, I don't think anybody has anything else to say, so I'm going to go ahead and use this opportunity to not let them say anything else until next week on the podcast again. So I thank everybody for joining us today on the MMO Roundtable. We had quite the discussion, and we created basically 2 other questions, which can you guys write those down so I don't forget them? Because you guys know I forget everything. So we have 2 more questions some other time to dive into. I'd like to thank Limpos, Osai, Plastic Waste, and Card for stopping by for today's discussion. Everybody in chat for helping us out with questions and points, because you guys kept it flowing. You see, like, you help as well. Just because you're not in the chat doesn't mean you're not impacting it. So thank you to you guys as well. And I think we had a lot of good discussion today. Really, a lot of good points brought up. Good acronyms brought up even. I think there's some acronyms here we could start throwing around. Maybe we'll have a real acronym, official acronym discussion someday. And I'll invite Limpos because I think you make a lot of good points about not just losing your identity because of adding certain elements to it. So we'll leave that for the next discussion. I'm not going to get into that, but you and I have talked about that a lot before. So yeah, anyway, thanks for stopping by, guys, and I appreciate all of your time. I can't wait to see you guys for next week's MMO Roundtable, or you pointing at the camera if any of you would like to join us. Remember, we're pretty nice. You saw, we're pretty friendly. Even if we disagree, we're not going to hate each other. We've talked to each other a bunch of times, so we're not going to bite. It's okay. Thanks for stopping by, everybody.
Is the podcast still going after classic releases, or
Yeah.
will you be too busy playing?
Oh no, it's gonna keep going. I wouldn't do that. People would kill me.
No, but just imagine it, dude. Like, you're leveling all the day, getting to level 60, and you're like, what? I have to make a podcast? Who's even gonna show up? Everyone will be playing, dude.
I guess a lot of the people who would be playing with me anyway probably would be watching, so it would be kind of funny because we'll probably sit our characters somewhere inside of the game, like during the podcast, just like sit in there. Like, the lobby for the podcast is going to be in the game. That's my dream for the future. We have a game that we like so much, or multiple games, or we can just like go and do events in those games. But I digress. I'll be playing multiple MMOs throughout however long I last on this earth. But I'm, as much as I possibly can, I'm going to try and keep the podcast going because I like it. Fun. So yeah. Good question, but don't worry about it. Anyway, goodbye, everybody here. I just want to say goodbye to you guys.
All right,
See ya.
bye.
See you all around.
See you guys. All right. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, we can get to the last segment of the podcast. We've ran a little bit longer today than we normally do, but I've got a lot of energy because I actually slept like semi-decently for once. Though I'm definitely gonna need some medication in a second. It's hot in here, but I brought a tiny little fan in, so at least that's doing something. So right now is the call-in segment of the podcast, which is usually like the last couple of minutes, last 20 minutes or so. If you have any questions, and by the way, it actually is legally medication, Limpos. It's the CBD variant, so don't worry. It's not as exciting as it sounds. But this is the call-in segment of the podcast where you guys either... Well, you can't call in today because we just don't... We stayed in our discussion for too long, so I just don't have enough time to do more voice chats. But if you could ask me a question in the Discord or in Twitch chat, you could at me or at Limpos or at Card or any of the moderators like Ludens, and we will gather your questions and I'll answer those now. Remember, all questions apply, so you can ask me whatever you feel like asking. If it's something that's more personal, maybe you might want to PM that to me or email that to me. But yeah. Oh yeah, before I forget, the point that the question that I never even made to you guys, I kept it like a secret. That was shitty of me. Sorry, I forgot about it. But Limpos just mentioned it. The thing that I wanted to dive into next week was that should MMOs last forever? Hear me out. My girlfriend and I were talking and we thought of a great idea. If you're going to trickle story out over the course of multiple years, this means that inevitably your world has to end. You're giving it an end time. Every world has to end, including our world. So it's like, what if we could find a way to have sorry, I'm getting added in chat. Yeah, I'm down with that, Card. If you're listening still, just let me take a little bit of a break after, and I'll stick around. If anybody, by the way, who's in the guild would like to talk about guild stuff, lore, and just organization stuff, feel free to stay and chat after. We'll chat in Discord about it. It won't be on stream though. But anyway, I just keep derailing myself. But hear me out. What if you had a 2-3 year lifespan of a game with a fantastic end to it that boom goes into another game where it's like the upgraded version of that game because now they have more money, more resources, and things like that. And they could keep evolving the game in that way instead of just doing it in the same universe. Because what I'm personally finding to be very difficult, as everybody on the podcast today kind of figured out, is how long is an MMO supposed to last? Because hear me out. It's a game. So it's not technically a world in like this sense. In today's day and age in a world, right? When you load into this world, it takes a long time to be able to do anything really fun, right? It takes a number of years. And then it takes like a lot of resources to kind of get things done. Well, MMOs, MMOs are a little bit different because they're a game, right? So it still needs to be fun and enjoyable. So you need to make it less like a chore and more like fun, right? And so you did talk about that, Card. I remember that. But I feel like an MMO might need an end to it. And maybe that's part of the problem is like you look at Asheron's Call. What did that game do really, 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 really well? Better than probably anybody I've ever seen. Story content released monthly for years. I'm talking 3 to 4 years. Consistent content released every single month about the story. And then they released Asheron's Call. What they fucked up is that was too close to the release, so it was not far enough away. But back then, technology was advancing so fast that a new game would pop up and boom, it was outdated. A new game would pop up and boom, it was outdated. So it was just like, there's a lot of other things that go into it back then. But I'm just saying, like, what if we have an MMO now, we design, and we're like, hey, this is going to have a world narrative, it's going to be immersive, factions, and all of this gameplay. And however the game ends up in 2 years, meaning however the story goes, however players do with the game, whatever ends up happening, this world eventually is designed to come to an end. It's designed to come to an end. So players either bring it to the end
or the forces defeat the players, which ends the world, right? And now you have players hyped as shit, like, oh my god, they just destroyed our world. Now what? And then boom, you release the fucking sequel. It's like, I don't know why that hasn't really been done, other than the fact that MMOs are expensive and, well, maybe they haven't thought about it yet. I don't know. It's like saying, how long does a TV show need to go on for? But you have soap operas that have been running every episode, or on an episode every week for 60 plus years. While I see what you're saying, I think the slight difference there is that certain TV shows get away with it a lot more than other TV shows. I would actually make the argument that most good TV shows don't last very long. For example, Mad Men is one of my favorite TV shows, if you guys couldn't guess. And I think after like 3 seasons, it's kind of... maybe 4 if I'm being generous, but I wouldn't really watch it after that. What are other examples of this? The Office. I really enjoyed the first 4 or 5 seasons, but not a whole lot after that. There's some things you almost wish ended sooner, right? You almost wish they would have just ended before. Alright, I'm scrolling through for questions right now. Sorry, I had to scroll like pretty far up, and apparently I can't even scroll up far enough to read all the... Oh! While I'm waiting for some more questions, so continue to ask questions if you guys have more. I wanted to bring up something that happened today that was kind of crazy. So, something that was crazy to me was what MMOs really do and what they mean. Like, here's what I mean. So, man. Alright, here's another rant. I'll try and keep this one short. Yesterday on my podcast video, I get a post from a guy. And what stuck out to me the most about this post was that I recognized his voice, sorry, his name. I recognized his character's name. And you're gonna think I'm crazy, guys, because my memory is typically terrible. But I didn't just remember the character name. I remembered that this was his alt's name. So he used to name himself this name on an alternative character. And this was fucking crazy to me because when I was going through and looking at it, look at this. I gotta find this for you guys. Look at this post right here. Isn't that insane, guys? MMOs aren't just games. They're not just games. I'm literally getting found by people that I knew before, that I played MMOs with, and played Halo with. And my friends are telling them about my videos, and then you scroll down one more, and this is another one of my childhood best friends that I grew up with. He actually said that he had caught my series randomly a year ago, but he didn't even know it was me, and he liked the series. It's just like, sometimes, dude, this shit just humbles you because you realize, like, this guy right here, like, if you're watching, by the way, what's up? But this guy, I grew up playing MMOs with this guy. I mean, he was the guy who played all of those MMOs with me back then. You remember I told you guys the story that I couldn't afford anything because I was like a young, poor kid, so I would just hop from game to game to game, playing trials and free versions and whatever else. And this guy was right there with me. Like, he was doing that right there with me. It's just crazy to, like, see the whole thing come to fruition, and then, like, now see people that I grew up with, basically, that I played MMOs with, are still playing MMOs and are still relating to me over MMOs. All those years, my dad has his faults. He cares. That's not one of his faults. But he would always tell me when I was young that games are antisocial. Like, why don't you go get a life? Like, why don't you go outside? Like, doing that
is so antisocial. Why don't you go out and enjoy your life? That's what he would always say to me. And meanwhile, I'm thinking to myself, well, I just killed a crate dragon and looted a pearl that was worth a couple mil credits. I'm living pretty good. Like, that's, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I was thinking at the time. I was like, I mean, I just crafted perfect composite armor. And I got weapon mods and armor mods. Like, I'm kind of doing all right. It sounds funny, but it's like I'm this young kid with nothing in life, right? I'm poor. I don't have a lot going for me. My parents are divorced. I'm not very happy with my life. And yet, in the MMO, I could be something. I could be somebody. And that's something to your psyche. It like tells you that. Don't let go of that part of yourself, you know? That part of yourself that wants to keep dreaming, that wants to keep having fun, and wants to keep expressing yourself. And, you know, all the years that people told me being on the computer was antisocial, it's just funny to come back to this and see how wrong they were. That what I love the most about these kind of games was the very fact they were social. So it's just, isn't that kind of funny to think about? Because they didn't understand it, they would just say that it wasn't social because it's on the computer. So how could that be social? But I say that out loud because sometimes I even just like realize shit about myself because I don't really remember a whole lot. Final Fantasy XIV already said they will have an end story and they will bring out X-Backs after that. That's a good idea, that they will have an end story. Because they know they have to pivot to a new game. Like I feel like once you've been in the game long enough in the space of MMOs, you realize it never lasts forever. You have to be able to pivot. And I think that's the thing with WoW is like, how are they going to pivot? Are they going to pivot into the classic direction? Are they going to pivot into a new game? Or you know, they have to pivot. Otherwise, they're going to die. You either grow or you die, pretty much. What would you like to see a future MMO do? I would probably say really nail professions. Like what it means to be a certain class and identity. Like class identity and character identity I think is so important to me. It's why you hear me talk shit about theme park games all the time, but yet why do I always talk about how much I love Warhammer Online? The classes. Really. It's the classes, it's the lore, it's the world building, it's tying it all together. It all made sense. Every class looks like it should look, plays how it should play. I'm not saying they're all balanced, but you get what I'm saying. Like visually stimulating and mentally stimulating, and have enough variety within them to play them in different ways. Hey, sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel, like Limpos said. Sometimes you don't have to like do everything differently to make it better. Sometimes you actually only need to change a couple of things to make it right. Another rant incoming. This reminds me of a comment by David Weber on if he would write another sequel to one of his books, and his answer was, the character is now so powerful, a new story would not be that interesting. I totally agree with that comment. And I didn't think about it in that case, but my girlfriend brought up that argument as well. She mentioned it in the context of D&D. She said level 14 to level 20 in D&D is a completely different experience than level 1 to 10. It just is. It's just a completely different experience. 1 to 5 even, or 1 to 10, you're such a noob, you know what I mean? Like you're so early on, you can get killed by your first encounter. And yet later on, do you really care about the combat as much? No, it's more about the story. Because your characters are so powerful, you can like destroy everything. Why don't people keep playing the same D&D characters? Let me ask that question again. Why don't people in D&D who play the game, the millions of people who play, why don't they keep just playing the same character? Why? They're incentivized to play other characters. Their characters can die and live, so they're not infallible and they can't not make, or they can't just keep playing him forever because somehow he can just live forever, right? He's going to die at some point in some kind of encounter at some point, statistically speaking. So it teaches you the idea that you can't get married to your character in D&D. Not if you want to play D&D as a whole, maybe a certain campaign, but you need to be able to play multiple characters or have multiple characters and not get so attached to just one character. I'm curious on your thoughts about party finder systems. I think they're a symptom of a bigger problem. If your game needs a party finding system, it essentially means that it, first and foremost, is focusing on convenience and getting players together as a means of convenience. I would ask the question of, okay, so why? Why do you focus so much on making your game more convenient? And what you'll find with games that often have party finder systems is they have many other systems that do something similar, that take away from your ability to engage in social activities. So on its own, is a party finder system like bad? Not necessarily, but and when you consider that it also has all of those other things also accompanying it that maybe take away from certain social experiences, well, now you kind of see the problem with it. It also, the problem with party finder system is that I personally don't like it. Like, I don't agree with it as a means of finding a partner. And the reason that is because let's say I'm playing an MMO and I want to just do a raid, a 5-man raid or a 10-man raid. I could use my party finder, but I can't really control for who I'm going to get. So that's why I personally don't like using party finders. So I would rather go find the exact people that I want to play with so I know that we can actually have the best experience because I care about the experience itself, not actually doing it. That could be maybe part of it, is my mindset's a little bit different. I'm thinking more about the experience than just like doing the thing, I guess. If that makes sense? Because, yeah, I mean, essentially an LFG system is a band-aid to fix other problems. Nerd loves LFG and LFR. I don't like them because they take away the personal accountability. And what I mean is, like, the beauty of playing on Grobulus, Horde side, or Alliance, or whatever side you play on. Sorry, just playing on Grobulus, period, an RP PvP server, is you bet your ass. When we encounter annoying players who steal, players who whatever, they're going on a list. Because that's how you police your server. You find out who the dickweeds are, treat them like they're dickweeds, and then ignore them, and then stick with playing with the people who actually want to have fun and a good time. I'd rather be able to vet my players than just get random players who are just going to fuck off. And I mean, really, like, there's a great example of this. Yesterday, I did a trial in Final Fantasy XIV. One of my players died immediately, got killed by the boss. And so we ended up beating the trial with just the remaining players. So we didn't even need that player. He never rezzed and he never came back. So it was like, I don't know, like that, having that experience was so strange to me. Because I just couldn't think of an accurate experience that would back that up. That reminds me of like my childhood playing MMOs, like old MMOs. Like, did I ever have an experience where I could just, a dude just doesn't show up and we still make it? No. Like, why the fuck would we? You know what I'm saying? It's like, if I'm working on a rowboat and I need 4 people and we show up with 3, we should suck ass. Like, we should. We should suck ass. It should be really hard. It wasn't. And that's, again, if players don't matter as much, that's why they don't matter. Because they need to matter more. There needs to be more consequence, because then player interactions and their quality of play matters a lot more as well. They're more willing to be nicer to you, too, when they feel like there's a point of talking to you in the first place. If there's no point in talking to anybody, then why talk to anybody? Perfect example, when a game has a really good ping system, a lot of players will just ping instead of talking. Why? You don't have to talk. Ping, right? But that's why you don't want those kinds of systems in a game that's about being social. You don't want it to take away from being social in a game that's about being social. It just goes against it. What do you think about paranoid people who think they're going to add a WoW token to Classic, or they're going to add bad stuff to the shop? I mean, continue to be paranoid, but just know that you're essentially making an argument, a slippery slope argument, which, you know, let's just Google slippery slope, see what comes up. Slippery slope argument, in logic, critical thinking, or political rhetoric, and case law, is a logical fallacy in which a party asserts that a relatively small first step leads to a chain of related events, culminating in some significant effect. I would probably argue it's mostly a slippery slope fallacy at this point, but I won't deny that there is a precedent to fuck it up, if that makes sense. Frankly, you should be RP walking everywhere, the truest experience that makes the game lost. Yeah, LFR when it is current in Final Fantasy XIV is actually challenging and will result in multiple wipes months later. What games are you enjoying now, including single-player games? Oh yeah, I love talking about games I enjoy. I hate when people only ask me to talk about games I don't enjoy. The current games I'm enjoying are Rayman Legends. I'm enjoying Mario Party. Pretty much all the games on my Switch. Mario Party, Mario Kart, Zelda, Smash Brothers. I play those all the times with my friends. I've been playing a lot of Halo 1 campaign on Legendary just because I missed the game, and playing co-op with my cousin, and also playing online on the Master Chief Collection on the Xbox because I know it's gonna take forever to be able to play on the PC. So I'm just like, well, damn it, I guess I'll just play on the day. I didn't want to play on the Xbox anymore because I'm trying to learn on PC. But all right, I went back and started messing people up on the Xbox. So I've been doing that. I've been playing WoW Classic, of course, in my off time, just leveling characters, trying out specs and things of that nature, getting ready for the launch. Of course, I've been playing Final Fantasy XIV as well. I'm level 39 in that. And what other games? Oh, Rock Band. Lots of party games. I like to play games with my cousin, with my girlfriend, with my friends. And then in terms of PC, it's been mostly MMOs at the moment. I liked when I'm in the writing mode and I'm writing about MMOs, I like to play MMOs, even if they're not the same game. So when I was writing Auto Assault, I was playing Final Fantasy XIV and WoW. You know what I'm saying? Like whichever one I chose to play at the time, I was playing them. So here is here is a part of my view. I could stand in town posting in chat, waiting on a group, or I could just post on a board and go farm or something. Or I could post on a board and go farm or something. So, sorry, what did you mean by posting on a board? You mean like a forums? I don't really like Guild Blacklist, Huel, but I do like Guild Gank List. So I do have a KOS list pretty much in every game I ever play, where these are guys who've we've tried to be kind to, and they've kind of said, fuck that. So we'll just kill them every single time we see them. So I do have KOS lists in all of my guilds. 14 has a terrible LFG because part of the community thinks that there is no eye level requirement on a lot of things. Oh, in WoW you mean? Oh, sorry, you mean WoW and Final Fantasy XIV. It paid off for me too, Card. I got free stuff from being nice to people and talking to people. I got guilds. People customized my guild hall for me. They gave me things for all of that happened not from begging, not from pleading with people, but from just playing the game and being social. Because again, that's the point of it. What do you think about grinding mobs for items, money, or experience in MMORPGs? Do you think it can ever properly be implemented? Or are you opposed to the concept itself? I'm not against grinding because grinding exists as a concept in the real world. For example, whenever I'm tired and I go to jiu-jitsu and I don't really feel like sparring, but it's a sparring day, I have to kind of gut through it and get through it, right? That's kind of grinding. That's grinding it out. And I'm going to get better for that, but it might not be the most enjoyable thing in the moment when I'm grinding it, right? With LFG, players don't matter at all. You can just replace them with the click of a button. I actually agree that players don't matter at all. That's my problem with Final Fantasy XIV system is, so far, none of us have talked to each other. None of us talk to each other. And I can only assume it's because the guys that I'm doing these trials or duties with have done them a million times. So they don't really need to talk about what to do. Hey, a big announcement for Guild Wars 2 is scheduled at PAX in 10 days. Community is bracing for disappointment. Have you talked about that, and what's your opinion? That's a really good point. I did not know that. I guess, if I remember correctly, Lempos was speculating that it was going to be another chapter announcement or another season announcement, something along the lines of more of the same of what's currently working. But I would love to see something big. I just don't know what to expect at this point, you know? Guild Wars 2, by the way, is a game I will return to do the leveling experience. I'm trying to make it a habit of going through every mainstream MMOs, like kind of like leveling experience, and like talk about the game, talk about the leveling experience, and then talk about it as an MMO. So currently, obviously, I've been doing Final Fantasy 14, but I want to do Elder Scrolls and Guild Wars 2 eventually. So I'll be playing Classic WoW, so I'll have a lot of WoW coverage. I don't need to go back to BFA. But then I'll be covering Guild Wars 2 at some point, and as well as Elder Scrolls. I don't know when, so don't hold that against me yet, but just look for that in the next, I would just say, like, less than a year. Like, less than a year, I'm going to do a big focus on those different games, streaming, making a couple of videos, that sort of thing. Just because I need to give them some sort of attention. I can't just not talk about them, which is kind of what I do now in my videos. I don't really mention them in my videos. I don't have videos that talk about them, if that makes sense. Besides the ones that just say I don't play them, which I don't mind that video that I made of Guild Wars 2. I do feel like I can make a better video if I change the way I made it, which is kind of what I'm trying to do with this Final Fantasy 14 video. So we will see how it goes. It is late stage capitalism in the MMO form. I mean, it kind of is. I mean, I feel like a slippery slope isn't wrong. We've seen enough slopes over 5 years to know one is being built. I mean, but built on what? Like, you have to be specific. I don't like slippery slope fallacies because it just sounds like fear-mongering. Like, they're just gonna microtransaction. It's like, I mean, we don't have anything to like believe in that yet. Nothing really says that they're gonna do that yet. nerdSlayer Smash tournament? I'll play Smash with you, but you need to give me at least a day to practice. I'm out of practice right now. So in 14, you have duty and party. Okay. To me, everyone is KOS. Eve Blood. Duty is if you queue up and you don't know what you're gonna get. Party Finder is who you can post. I'm looking for people. Okay. Duty is you queue up and you don't know. Party Finder is you can post. I'm looking for people to do this dungeon, and then you can get whispers or have them join and set restrictions. Gotcha. So you prefer to use Party Finder, is what you're saying, over the Duty Finder. Once I get to the more challenging content in Final Fantasy 14, I'm going to try and use the Party Finder instead to see if that maybe changes my experience. Grinding technically doesn't exist in a true RPG if you look at it from the perspective of, if you're doing a mechanic, is that really grinding if it's supposed to be fun? Right? LFG is more as an advertisement board versus a queue and roll the dice. What I would like. I see what you're saying. That makes a lot of sense. In fact, I don't want to speak for that, but I can't help but feel like that does exist or has existed in some context before. Level boost to 60 in WoW Classic. What a completely useless thing to do. Slippery Slope 2007, Horse Armor Outrage. 2017, Star Wars Loot Box Outrage. Yeah, that's kind of... actually, that's a perfect example. A Horse Armor Outrage, yes, it is the beginning, and yes, it technically is the beginning of the slope, but is it the reason that the Star Wars loot boxes exist? No, not. Loot boxes are a separate concept. How much do you care about progression like gear upgrading and how your power level scales as you develop your character? I feel like it's kind of undervalued and it can often make or break a game. Sometimes I've played games that were deeply flawed because I liked them because of their progression systems. So you're talking about like a power creep? Power creep I think is useful and necessary in every MMO. And I think that power creep is okay. Where I have an issue with power creep is when it becomes... We're not even doing it for the stats, really. We're just doing it because, like, what the fuck else is there to do? That's what I don't like about gear treadmills, is, like, when I'm only doing the treadmill because there's nothing else to do. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, for the sake of just getting gear? No, I'm not that guy. I've never been that guy. Like, I'll get bored immediately if I'm that guy, you know? Yes, it did. Boss. WoW has it and 14 has it, but so many people dog on the system now. Trends in the industry, I feel like all games monetize the same way. First you add a currency and a direct store, then you add a main event, or then you make an event with flat chances, an event loot box with flat chances, then you make a loot box familiar, then add rarity. It is a cycle that you do see a lot, and it's kind of why I never understood why people thought Arcade was only Tryon that was messing it up. Speaking of Arcade, though, did you guys hear about that Arcade Unchained thing? Apparently they just announced that this Arcade Unchained thing is supposed to be another version of the game. Apparently it's going to have a one-time purchase for a box price. I wonder what that is, because they're at least trying to make that in money. They're saying that you will be able to purchase vanity items via credits, and we will implement seasonal arc passes. Okay? Right, why didn't you change the monetization of the original instead of making a new game out of it? Over the last years, we have considered... Well, it's not a new game. I just don't agree with that. It's not a new game. That's marketing. It is the same version. It's just you're changing it. It's not a new game. The original servers are going to exist. So apparently they're going to do 2 different servers. They're going to do an Unchained server, which seems to be like, we're trying to right more wrongs that were wronged multiple times. Okay. Has a different business model. There will be no transfer of items amongst the 2 servers. That's actually surprising to see. Most Prime servers or freemium servers want you to be able to transfer eventually. What will be the price? They don't know. That's super important. There's no subscription in Arcade Unchained. You can simply purchase an advantage over others. Or no one can simply purchase an advantage over others. Everyone will have the same amount of labor regeneration and a cap of 5,000 labor points. Wow, that's huge. That's huge. I mean, I gotta give them credit for that. I've been sounding pretty down, but that's a pretty big point, so I'll give them credit for that. What about Apex? Apex will not exist. Okay, whew. They're getting rid of the Apex currency. Another good thing. Will there be new content alongside this release? Both versions are going to get made. Nah, here's what they're gonna do. Yeah, I'm gonna tell you guys right now what they're gonna do. They're going to release new content for both of these versions. Whichever does better, they're gonna abandon the other one. Or at least, like, focus more on the other one. It just makes more sense to do that. Why focus all your resources on 2 different ones when you don't know if it's going to work properly? Huh, this is pretty interesting news. Do they have a trailer that came with this? You know they probably did. Let's see. Teaser trailer, here we go. The community has spoken like 6 years ago, but okay, I get the point. To be fair, this is a new publisher. What's interesting is how is this going to affect balancing? Because Apex and Thunder, Wood, and all of that sort of stuff, labor and that nature, is all an integral part of the game. So I wonder how balancing is going to work in that case. When is the new Death of a Game? It should be coming out today, but if it isn't, I would look for tomorrow. But I should be getting an email anytime now from my editor that it's complete. I'm done on my end, so now I'm just waiting on his end. That's usually how it goes. I finish my end, he finishes his end. If it still has a cash shop, I'll probably skip. As far as I could tell, it has a vanity cash shop, and it has Game Pass, something about like a Arch Pass. They didn't really explain what that meant. Seasonal. Oh, so they're going for a seasonal model. You can purchase vanity items via credits, so not money, perhaps. And then we will implement a seasonal Arch Pass, which of course is not explained at all. So I don't know what the passes are, but it could just be like a typical Game Pass type of thing that a lot of these games try and do these days, but like updating it to the Fortnite model, I guess. Can't wait for the Death of a Game. Wow. Oh boy. That'll be a big one. I will enjoy that one. All right, it looks like like a battle pass, Mr. Nylon. Thanks. I couldn't think of the name or like how to describe it. I don't have anything else to add today. I think I've covered all of the questions. It looks like chat's slowing down. So I'm going to go ahead and use this as an opportunity to end the podcast. I'd like to thank everybody for stopping by and watching episode 46 of the podcast. We had a lot to talk about. Really fun and insightful MMO Roundtable. And hopefully a long enough AMA at the end so I can answer all of your questions. Lots of MMO news today. Arcade Unchained, hey, I don't want to get your hopes up, guys, but they got my attention now. How about that? That's the best they'll get out of me. You got my attention now. Okay, Game Ago. All right. Let me see some more. But hey, it's exciting. Finally, hopefully. Why do I add all of these caveats? Because Tryon tried to do this with Arcade before, and they pissed everybody off and made it even worse. So with Gamago now in charge, is this really going to be different this time? That's what everybody's wondering. Anyway, I've got nothing more to add. I will see you guys later, and I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast and my rants today. I don't normally like to rant so passionately and negatively. You know, I'm an aggressive person, but I'm not a very hostile person. I don't want to hurt people or come at people with that kind of hostile energy. It's just like after a while, there's only so much you can take, you know? And, you know, that big rant I had about Mark Kern, it's not even specifically like about just him. Like, I just don't like developers, period, who don't take fault. Because the only way you can learn is by taking fault. And it's like, when I've had actual developers tell me my videos are helpful, it's like, dude, if they can find some sort of like help in it, you're telling me you couldn't find anything about your own, you know, journey along that way? I don't know. Maybe I just naively hope they would. That's why he's training to be a killer, so that he can kill you, but he just won't. Yeah, like, more like too lazy to kill anybody. Death of a Game, WoW, would be a 12-episode season of Death of a Game. It'd be a full season. A good rant can feel good. And it did feel good to get that energy out of me, Sacrilegious. It did. Because it's just like, man, I don't like Mark Kerns, if that makes sense. Not Mark Kern. Yeah, I don't like him, but I don't like Mark Kerns. People like that. Because they don't have this industry's best wishes in their mind, if that makes sense. Like, they don't have our best wishes in mind. All they care about is just fulfilling whatever own power fantasy they have on their own. I don't think it's overkill. I actually think it's just very calmly expressing my dislike and distaste for the guy. Where it got more heated was after I realized yet again that it actually was worse than I originally thought. I think that's what made me actually mad, is like, wait a minute, I was making this argument actually pretty like casually and pretty liberally. And now I'm actually realizing even worse than I originally thought. So it's just funny to think about that. Like, I have videos that I've done where I feel like I wish I did more of this, or I wish I didn't do as much of this. And looking back at Firefall, I actually wish I would have dived a lot more into his personal part of the story, because I think it basically was the story, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. My voice is running out of saliva. That usually means I need some water and I need to take a break. Anyway, why put that much money in that project? I have no idea, dude. I can't answer that question. And I hope the guys defending Mark Kern can, because I don't know. Maybe somebody can. Anyway, I love you guys so much. That's why I can't say bye to you guys, but I am saying bye. And this is bye. A reminder to everybody, next week on Monday, Classic WoW launches. That means if you're not playing with me, what are you doing? All right? Because we know you can't really play Final Fantasy with me yet, because I'm still early level, so that's not going to happen. So play WoW with me. Remember, Grobulus, board server. There is a launch event on the 28th, so the day after launch, we're going to be attacking an alliance event. They're having a welcome party for the server. And what way to celebrate than for the Horde to come crash it? So anyway, I'll leave you guys with that, and I hope you guys will come join us in our journey and engaging in that game. And hopefully Arcade fixes their shit so we can go back and play that game too. Because I just miss playing MMOs, man. That's the thing I'll leave you with today. Let's play some MMOs, man. I'll see you guys later, for real this time. I'm on Ultros.